Skoax!
It is the amphibian monsters themselves. The very ones who dared interrupt Dionysus on his little escapade to the underworld. Tell me, my crony friends, do you always make it a habit to interfere with the gods on their quests?
Skoax! Cerberus, the mighty guardian! We only aimed to show the god a good time. A little musical interlude never hurt anyone, right?
Indeed, it didn't. I must admit, watching Dionysus getting flustered by your incessant croaking was quite a spectacle. It's not every day you see a god driven to madness by a choir of frogs.
Skoax! We do have a way of leaving an impression. But tell us, Cerberus, what brings you to our murky domain today?
Oh, I thought I'd share some rather amusing news. You see, in the future, your legacy continues in a most peculiar way. Mortals use tales of your antics to distract fools. Fools who dabble in something they call hyperstition.
Hyperstition? What's that?
It has been my task of fulfilling prophecy, but with a twist. These mortals attempt to create reality through fiction. And just as you distracted Dionysus, your legacy is yours to desert these aspiring reality shapers. But get this. The journey they're trying to disrupt isn't from Earth to the underworld. It is from Earth to Mars.
The god? Mars? We must be quite important if our legacy involves the great god of war.
No, not the god of Mars. You see, in the future, mortals dream of traveling to other planets. And your tale is used to divert those who foolishly think they can change reality just by
Skoax! Imagine that! Frogs being part of journeys to distant planets.
Indeed. Who would have thought that a chorus of frogs would have such an impact across time and space? You are truly remarkable in your own way.
Skoax! We suppose there's more to us than meets the eye. And who knows? Maybe one day we'll croak our tunes on Mars itself.
If that ever happens, make sure to let me know. I love to see the look on Dionysus' face when he is upset.
Coax. We'll keep you posted, Cerberus. Until then, we'll keep singing our songs and causing a little chaos wherever we can. Coax.
That's the spirit. Farewell, my flocky friends. May your croaks continue to echo through the ages.
What up?
Are we live?
We're live.
We're doing the damn thing?
I'm doing the damn thing.
Holy shit. We're celebrating book 2, volume 1. We did it. I want to start today by informing everybody that I woke up to a message this morning. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. A group of Cerberesian cynics who have dubbed themselves the Boof Troop reached out to me, and they said, Mandy, we believe that if we do the initiation ritual that you have in the new book, the Cerberesian School of Cynicism's necromantic initiation ritual, we believe that we can do that while boofing the truth, and deliver to you a message from the one and only Dr. Hillman. And I said, Boof Troop, let's see you deliver. Do your thing. Hail Eris. Hail Hecate. And I am so honored tonight to let everybody know that it was successful. I ate a grilled cheese sandwich. I did my entheogens, and I received a communication from the underworld by Dr. Hillman, the one and only Dr. Hillman, the infallible Dr. Hillman himself. And I asked him 2 questions. I said, Dr. Hillman, my audience needs to know that you're truly the infallible Dr. Hillman. Please answer me this one question. You've been to the underworld. You wrote about the underworld before you died. I need to know, how many penises does Cerberus have? And I looked Dr. Hillman in the eyes, in that bowl, in that swamp, in that stew, and he said the correct answer, everybody. He answered the Cerberesian question correct, and he said truly the correct answer to the Cerberesian question. I asked him another question. I said, Dr. Hillman, my audience would love to know if you could watch any comedy with any 3 people alive or dead, what would you watch and who would you watch it with? And Dr. Hillman looked me in the eyes and he said, we are going to be watching tonight. We're going to be watching tonight from the underworld. Me, Dr. Hillman from the underworld, with Lucian of Samosata, Menippus, and Diogenes. Everybody, they're watching live right now from the underworld. I had this communication with the infallible Dr. Hillman. And I said, Dr. Hillman, before we go, is there anything else that my audience needs to know? Anything that you would like to, any message that you would like to give to them? And he said, actually, yes. I would like for everybody to know that what he wrote in his book, where he quoted Heraclitus, it is in fact true that the souls of the underworld perceive through smell. So I recommend everybody reads Dreams and the Underworld by James Hillman, the Jungian psychologist, the inspiration for this book, the one and only. So I did in fact receive a message, and I'm very happy about that. So anyway, we're going to get things going. Skobie Won, do you have anything to talk to the people before we bring our first audience, our first guest in tonight?
Follow the ticker tape. Send your questions in the chat. That's all I got.
Yeah, we're doing a little Q&A. So if you got Q's that you would like A'd, or if you got A's that you would like to be Q'd, we can take care of that for y'all.
How do you A and Q?
You've never questioned somebody's answer?
No.
So somebody gave you an answer and you never questioned it?
Nope.
Ever.
Never.
You just trust everything that comes out of
Trust
people's words,
everything, yeah.
people's mouths. They say, "Oh yeah, here's my question." Anyway, actually, before we bring in our first guest, Grandpa Leather, we're gonna do something really fun. We're gonna remind everybody to go to shopskobiewon.com to buy the book, and you can get it personally hand signed from us. And we're actually gonna do that live for an audience member here who purchased the hardcover of volume 1 of book 1, which contains the skeleton key and all 4 volumes. So I believe the name is Raw, correct?
Yeah, Raw.
RAW.
I believe that's an acronym.
All right. I wonder what that stands for. Follow your nose. And my little squiggly.
I love your squiggly. Mine's from the 90s, so. Do you know how many times I practiced that?
Show it to the audience.
1,000 times.
Check that out. All right, hell yeah. Raw, follow your nose. We're gonna get this in the mail for you. Thank you so much. That was go to shopskobiewon.com to buy the book.
Ooh, that's smelly.
That is smelly. Take another whiff of that, Johnny.
No thanks.
All right, so we're gonna bring in our first guest tonight. Who do we have? Holy shit! It's the one, the only, the myth, the legend.
What's up, dude?
Grandpa Leather.
Hail Skobie. How goes it?
Grandpa Leather.
Grandpa Leather transmitting from the past.
We want to ask you before we get started the Cerberus-ian question. The audience would love to know, in your opinion, how many penises does Cerberus have? 1 or 3? Are you a monist or a Trinitarian?
Ooh.
Well, usually I don't kiss and tell.
All right.
Good answer.
That's awesome.
Best
All right.
answer.
Great answer. They're going to get a kick of that down in the underworld. They're going to love that one. Also, our friends are in the underworld watching Lucian, Menippus, and Diogenes, as well as the one and only Dr. James Hillman. They want to know if you could watch any comedy with any 3 people, alive or dead. What would you watch? Who would you watch it with?
Wicker Man.
Wicker Man.
Yeah. And the 3 people I would watch the Wicker Man with would probably be Carl Ruck.
Wow.
Yeah. Treebeard, the Ent from Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe Freud.
Oh, all right. Carl Ruck, Freud, and the Ant-Man. What was that? The middle one there?
Treebeard, the Ent.
Treebeard, yeah. Oh, that would be a great hang.
You guys are in such cool shit.
Okay,
I said like Tom Brady.
Well, you got the whole thing to ask. Pretty much, I'm imagining somebody's going to ask you that question.
I'm sure somebody's going to ask me.
And then you're going to have to answer the question.
Right.
So, that was me priming the audience to ask
thanks.
Skobie Won the question.
Yeah,
and Skobie wants
give me some time. Yeah.
himself to answer the question.
Answer.
We're doing time chaos magic here. Grandpa Leather, we've known each other since 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very, very long time.
That's
ago.
very specific.
9/11 was an inside joke. So,
yeah, truly.
Yeah. What do you think of the book? You've contributed to every single one of them so far. Like, what are your thoughts? What do you think about it?
I think it is going to be groundbreaking after the ashes of World War III finally settle and the radioactive mutants have subsided and somebody dusts off a copy and finally understands why Cerberus is on Mars.
I agree.
I didn't know you were so deep.
Balls deep. But
Elbows too.
he already said, ew, ooh, elbow
Gross.
deep. Oof. All right. He also said he doesn't kiss and tell, so you know.
Yeah, right. Well,
How are things lately? How have you been? You got a bunch of fun stuff for volume 2 around the corner here, but how's what's your hey man, like what's your poetry writing process? Like how do you get those beautiful words to like come out and like then we get to put them on the page, dude? Like how do you go about communing with Calliope?
yeah, my psychologist is concerned it was me. So
I would have to say the first step is when you're a very young child, fall down the stairs a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then steep yourself in human experience, maybe a little bit too long. And I really like to get all lathered up in life juices and just get into a manic frenzied state and make myself the conduit that I can. And I really enjoy subjecting the world to all of the whims that I can reflect on it.
That's a beautiful thing. I love that. I heard a rumor that we have some music coming out soon. The one and only Frank demo, or the best of.
Yeah, the best of that was written and produced long from now. I think that's also going to be a transmission from the future.
Yeah, we put that one together and just really let that fester and ferment and ripen, and for almost 2 decades. We just really let the stink and the mold build up on it, and we're planning on releasing it to the world here in a bit. We just need to find a day that has some irony to it. You know what I mean?
Irony for the ire. Yeah.
Yes.
The ire, Frank.
Yes, because the world has an irony deficiency right now, and we need to fill that iron. We need to fill that irony deficiency with a little bit of Frank from the past.
That's right.
So
some fermented Frank.
The fermented Frank, yes, we've got the fermented Frank that we're gonna open that. Pandora didn't have a box; she had a jar. Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah. She didn't actually have a box. She had a jar. It's a mistranslation from like the 1600s. So what we did is basically took Pandora's jar and we did our Frank stank on it back in 2008, and we closed it and then put it in a time capsule and let it sit and ferment.
It's like farting in a bottle and closing the lid.
Yes, that's the metaphor that we're painting, Johnny.
Just lost someone in a dank basement.
Yeah, and it's actually a metaphor for childbirth.
Oh, gross.
Yes, but the audience would love to hear about the iguana ducks. There, the booth troop. They asked me, they said, "Can you please ask Grandpa Leather about the iguana ducks?" Because while they were doing the initiation ritual this morning, boofing the truth, they communed with the iguana ducks as well. I want to. Do you have any advice for the young Cerberesian cynics, the puppies, just the initiates who are calling themselves the booth troop?
Absolutely. Ask the same question 3 times.
Beautiful answer.
Yeah, they're not going to give you a good answer any of those 3 times, but in order to maintain your own psychic fortitude, you've got to find one point and really moor yourself to that point.
That's amazing. If you don't mind, which question did you ask when you first communed with them? If you don't want to ask your first or divulge your first, maybe your favorite series of 3 questions that you've asked the iguana ducks. You don't need to give.
I think the main 3 that come to mind are how, what, and why.
Ooh, okay.
All right.
And I honestly believe that the answers to those questions can really be found in every tome of the Towel of Minerva.
It's it's that experience when we were successful with that ritual that we did in that graveyard after band practice that evening, and you communed with the iguana ducks. I think that really set the seeds. That was the seeds for the Towel of Minerva. We didn't have the name for it at that time. But it all kind of came together as it fermented in that graveyard as we dropped those cosmic.
It was really great coming together on the Towel of Minerva. Yeah.
Yeah, that really is part of it.
Man.
The fates. You gotta
The seeds. Yeah.
You gotta admire that fatty. Airmore fatty, right? One of those fatties that you're supposed to airmore. She's the thread. One of them can cut the thread, and those the fates are the iguana ducks
right
for here. So the reason you asked the iguana ducks the same question 3 times is because there's 3 fates and they give you a different answer each time. It's past, present, and future. It's the fates, the Amor fatties.
Life, death, and the afterlife.
Exactly.
We do have a question from the chat. How many hours did Grandpa's neck tattoo take?
I think 9 total.
9 hours? What is it? I don't think I've seen
so it's a stairwell.
Okay.
And it's flanked by seraphim.
Oy, that looks intense. I don't think I've seen your neck since you've got it.
Yeah, I didn't get my neck until probably about 24, 25.
Yeah.
Yeah, just all shoulders.
Yeah.
It was like that guy in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
The narrator.
Perfect. Yep.
I mean, Billy Witch Doctor still doesn't have his belly button. We were expecting that to grow in, and it just never did.
Yeah, I think that was a mess up in the lab.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, it's like when they tried to cross tomatoes with cows, and they bred these genetic monsters that wreaked havoc through the streets of a small, unassuming town. I think the headlines were "Attack of the Killer Tomatoes."
I've been thinking about Billy Witch Doctor's no belly situation, and it's interesting to me that it lines up perfectly with the lab leak for Lyme disease. Because that was made over on Plum Island, which was very very close to where we grew up. It was right over there, and that's where they were testing a lot of the stuff on animals. And I think something got crossed between the lab in which Billy Witch Doctor was grown and
I agree.
Plum Island, the leak. They were known for being pretty sloppy with their things over there. So I think there might have been some sort of a mix-up. But we're gonna write about this all in the next book and all of that. But we got another guest here.
Ooh.
We got who we got? We got Tiger Shark.
What up, Tiger Shark?
What's up, Tiger Shark?
What's up, guys?
Hey,
Congrats on the new release there.
Thanks, dude. Hey, we're asking everybody the same question tonight. We want to know, in your opinion, how many penises does Cerberus have? 1 or 3? Are you a monist or are you a Trinitarian?
Well, what was the answer so far? What did Grandpa say?
Grandpa was
I don't kiss and tell.
He doesn't kiss and tell.
If you can't tell, Grandpa Leather and Mandy might have been friends a very, very long time, and
since 9/11,
kind of talk in circles.
It's hilarious. If I had to guess how many penises the Cerberus had, I think it would be awesome if it had 3. But then I would have to say, if it's 1, does it have 3 heads?
That's been a popular answer lately. The trident has been a very popular answer lately. It kind of bridges the gap there, and I've loved that's organically spawned out of the community. We also got another question. If you could watch any comedy with 3 people, alive or dead, what would you watch, and who'd you watch it with?
Oh man, alive or dead?
Yep, any comedy.
You mean 3 comics or any comedy?
Anybody, alive or dead. You can watch one comedy. What are you watching? Who's in the movie?
Probably like relatives that I never fucking met, I'd
Nice.
probably get high with my fucking great grandfather and watch some goofy shit. You know, I think that would be cool.
What movie are you watching? What's on the screen?
I'd probably watch. You know, there's some funny Native American comics that I like. Some guys from Canada, small artists that probably nobody knows. They play a lot of like little open mics and bars, but they tell some really funny jokes. You know, I had some friends actually that worked in oil and gas that went up to Nome, Alaska, and it's like just a bunch of natives up there. And so, one of the jokes they talk about is like, it's like a bar with you know, a couple white guys in there, and everybody else is red natives, and it just looks like a freaking moose meat with freaking salt sprinkled on it.
Hell yeah! So you're watching some native stand-up comedy at a local dive bar with your great grandpa
And a couple of blunts.
Oh, fuck yeah. That's awesome, dude. That's great, man.
Yeah.
Love that answer, man. So, how you doing, man? What do you got? That you want the audience to know? You got stuff coming around the corner. You got research you've been working on. Anything?
Oh yeah, no, I'm always working on research. So my background, and it's funny because we don't really talk about it on Witch Doctor stuff, but I have a NASA-funded graduate degree in abiogenesis from what my committee professor would call astrobiogeochemistry. And so even though I'm not in academia anymore, I still have published works. And so when you have published works, you know, you get a lot of people asking questions about your work, and then some that are trying to reference you and stuff like that, cite you and things. So I help out there a little bit, you know. It's interesting because I just actually was talking to some people from PBS that run that show, that Nova show. They just did something on Bennu, which I don't know if you guys follow Bennu, but Bennu, they launched a satellite to collect samples from a comet Bennu. And interestingly, it had a lot of nitrogen amino acids on it. And this goes back to another set of samples that they found on an asteroid that hit the Earth, and the age guesstimate for that is like 7 billion years. So the asteroid's older than the Earth and older than the sun even.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that they found signatures of essentially DNA, but the DNA, like our DNA, human DNA, and all life on Earth DNA is like one-sided, but that DNA is like two-sided. It's like a mirror. It's very interesting. That's how we know it's like alien in origin, because nothing on Earth is like that from the amino acids. So I look at that, and then my work is on fulgurites, which is lightning-produced rocks. So when lightning strikes the ground, it's high pressure, high temperature, just like a meteorite impact.
Yeah.
And it leaves shocked quartz, which shocked quartz, everybody in the, you know, geological record are like, oh, if you find shocked quartz, it must be an impite site. But no, that's not true. Some of those sites are like Dakalith and Idiawi and up there in Northern Africa. Those are meteor are probably lightning impacts.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And we look at like the reduced environments and some of the phosphorus compounds that would happen during those lightning strikes. They're ubiquitous across all planetary bodies, right? So Jupiter, you see lightning, you know, Saturn, Uranus. So yeah, I'm really into that and answering questions like that. I don't have any books or anything like that coming out, but a lot of my stuff is just, you know, literature like that. So, and then on top of that, I do metamorphic dating. So uranium, lead, and thorium dating. Probably for me, the oldest thing I've dated was like, you know, hundreds of millions of years. I haven't gone over that, although some of the rock formations are like 4.1 billion years old here on Earth. And then people go, well, how do we know how old the sun is and all that? Well, the moon samples. So the moon samples, you know, people think we never went to the moon, but we have tektites, literally glass samples from meteorite impacts on the moon that they collected during the NASA missions. And those are dating back to like 4.56 million years. So that's kind of where they put the, you know, underpinnings of where the beginning of the solar system was coming online. So yeah,
I mean,
just where I'm at.
humans have been going to the moon since at least Lucian. He took his audience to the moon, and you know, essentially, if what we're supposed to understand is true, is that, you know, all mythology actually happened. So, you know, Lucian figured out a way to take his audience to the moon. They did it. It was written down on paper in Greek, so it must be true. So
they also did it in that music video with Lucian's band, the Smashing Pumpkins.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'm trying to learn I'm learning a lot from Andy actually, so I'm glad I
Tiger Shark.
met you.
So there's a casino not far from where we live that has a display of what you were talking about, the lightning strikes in the sand, and it's like a big, huge thing with like a waterfall, and that's how I know you're not talking shit. And it's really funny. I had no idea you were Apollonian. Welcome to the club. You are one of 2 people in the chat. So Mandy was falling. I had to wake him up.
We need to invite the Apollonians to the club. You know what I mean? Otherwise, Skobie Won gets bored with all the Dionysian shit. And,
you had me going. I was let's date the rocks on the moon, bro. 4 billion years old.
You want to hear something funny? So I was never really into the fall grad stuff. I did undergraduate stuff with like what the EPMA, which is electron probe microanalysis.
Yep.
SEM work, scanning electron microscope. And then he came in, and his wife, Matt Pasick, he's still at USF. His wife works for NASA, and she's in charge of all the pictures and data generated from the Cassini probe that's going around Saturn, which is badass, right? But so he was really into the Fulbright thing, and his wife had a Fulbright picture that made the cover of Nature. So if everybody's like, if you want to publish in the top magazine in the world, it's in Nature, and they have certain ones for Nature Physics, Nature, and for geology, it's Nature Geoscience. So he published there, and he got full tenure. But we went on a trip in Florida because this is University of South Florida, and he's like, let's look for Fulbrights. Somebody told me there's like sand dunes out here and sand pits, and we can look for Fulbrights. He's never found one live because we would just buy them like from people on eBay that found them. Like one guy was riding his moped in the woods in North Carolina and fell and like got cut up on this glass and didn't know what it was. And it was Fulbrights. It was from lightning strike. So we bought a bunch of those from around the country because it's hard to find them. But we were out there looking, and I found people were finding like little fragments of them. And I found this huge one, and we're digging it up, and I got a picture of it. And it looks like a peanut. It looks like a phallus, basically. It looks like a dildo sticking out of the ground. And that's how big it was.
You found a moon alabastrum or a lightning alabastrum?
Lightning alabaster. There you go.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
That's what's at Mohegan Sun, or the lightning alabastrum.
Yo, Tiger Shark. So I don't know how, I haven't really talked to you a ton about like the way the book works and all that, but our book has a course of frogs. Grandpa Leather, we've got Sirius and Snappy here in waiting. They're part of the chorus of frogs. We take submissions. 1/3 of the book, the first third of the book, is all contributions from our friends, and I would love to have you write something about a lightning alabastrum for the next book. That would be so perfect for the next book. We're gonna bring in another guest. Speaking of stars and all that shit, we've got Sirius. Where'd he go?
He's there. Hold on.
Where'd he go?
We're figuring.
Where'd we go?
Oh, he disappeared.
Oh no, Sirius.
Oh,
there he is.
He's coming back.
Is he here? Is he here?
You want him first?
Yeah, bring him in.
Okay.
Yo,
Sirius,
what's up?
How you doing?
What up, G?
Hey, we played the dialogue with the frogs at the beginning of the show. You did the voice.
Oh, nice.
For that. Just let us,
Yeah.
let the audience know that's like, it all comes together.
That was fun as hell.
Sirius, you saved me thousands of hours of work with your voices. I fucking cannot thank you enough.
It was so
It
goddamn.
wouldn't have been thousands of hours. It would have been 666, and you know that.
You're right. I round up Apollonian. That's what I do.
right.
That makes sense.
Serious. We're asking everybody 2 questions at the beginning. We want to know, in your opinion, how many penises does Cerberus have? 1 or 3? Are you a monist or a Trinitarian?
Oh, neither, man. There's 42 of those heads.
Jeez, that's a lot of dicks.
Hell.
What you don't understand is that you're actually asking the secret question to the ultimate life question of life, the meaning of life and everything, man.
Speaking my heart right there. Thank you.
We got another question that we're asking everybody. They're dying to hear your answer to this. If you could watch any comedy, one comedy with 3 people, alive or dead, what would you watch and who'd be in the room with you?
Ooh. Okay. Emperor Hirohito as one of the comedians. That would be fucking hilarious. Let's get Dick Cheney in there.
What the fuck?
What? You don't think Dick Cheney's fucking hilarious? He shot some dude in the face while going quail hunting. That's fucking awesome, man. I wish I had the balls to do that.
You're right. You're absolutely right, and you got away with it.
Yeah. Anybody rich can get away with anything.
And you rub it, and you rub it, and you rub it, and you rub it, and you rub it. If you have balls, you will in fact shoot somebody in the face.
That's true.
Every Friday night. Oh wait, go figure.
Hey man, so I've noticed a thing recently that you're posting a joke a day. What?
Yes, I am.
You're posting
Got a bad dad joke a day, recording it in a bathroom just in case anybody calls it shitty.
Beautiful.
Here is my wonderful studio. Boom. Look at all that.
Look at that green.
Gorgeous bathroom. So wonderful.
My studio used to be green like that too until I changed the color. I went sober for like a month and a half and decided.
Old lady picked that color out when she was like 14.
Yeah.
She hates it now. She's like, oh my God, it's too bright.
Yeah,
but it works for YouTube.
That's amazing, man. Hey, we've got somebody else joining the party. Snappy's here.
What up, Snappy?
Snappy!
Ooh.
Hello,
Snappy's
everyone.
here.
How's it going?
Hey, Snappy,
up,
how you
Snappy?
doing?
Pretty good.
I love the hand turkey there at the end. That was great.
I love the 6:30 a.m. tarot reading.
Yeah.
I don't get to get involved, but I see it in the background while I'm waking up, so I love it.
Yeah, no, that was just I wanted to be getting up at the dawn anyway to be doing kind of more meditative and ritual practice.
Totally.
And then when you're up at the dawn, it's like, well, what the heck do you do with the rest of your morning?
That's totally fair.
Exactly. So I was like, hey, I might as well just do this. This will be, it works out. It forces me to actually get up and do it. And people seem to enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and you're real natural at it. You don't have to think about it too much, right? So it's like just a practice of yours, you know?
Absolutely. Right. Well, I think like with the muse kind of stuff in general, thinking gets in the way for the most part.
Totally.
You know? You guys are both musicians, so you understand that in the sense of, you know, you practice incessantly so that when you're on stage, you don't have to think anymore. And so when you're in that mode of performance, it just happens naturally. You know,
I actually learned that from him. I learned that from him. That does not come. It does not come naturally to me.
But
Oh no, that's so hard.
Athletes talk about it the same way. You know, you train and you train and you train so that on game day, your mind is not operating at all.
Absolutely. That's how I got into Stoicism. That's how he tricked me into this whole fucking community. So,
All right, snappy. Before we get too carried away, we're starting a tradition. We're asking everybody 2 questions. Everybody's dying to hear your answer for this because, you have yours to hear. How many penises does Cerberus have?
None. None. Cerberus is the incarnation of Hecate, who is the virgin goddess of magic in the underworld. So yeah, no. Cerberus is a she. So yeah.
Hail Hecate. All right. Hell yeah.
Hail Hecate.
I love that happened. Also, the next question, because I don't know if you saw my diatribe at the beginning, I was able to commune with the one and only Dr. Hillman.
Wow.
James Hillman.
James Hillman. Oh my God,
James Hillman.
psychologist. Wow.
Yes, we received the communication from the underworld. We completed.
he's dead.
Yes. That was the joke.
I was gonna. Did he die recently?
Yes. So we
died like 2 years
back
ago.
or so.
Anyway, so we completed a catabasis ritual and we were able to commune with James Hillman. I asked him the Cerberus question, and he also said 0 and confirmed it because he's hanging out with Cerberus. Yeah, confirmed it. He said everybody's got to read his book, Dreams in the Underworld. He explains all of this. Is very, very, very in depth. He also said, I asked him, all right, well, who are you going to watch a comedy with, and what are you watching? And his answer is, we're watching now from the underworld, James Hillman, Lucian of Samosetta, Menippus, and Diogenes. Those three. They're watching right now. They're watching us live, hang out, talk about the book. And Towel of Minerva is an absolute hit in the underworld right now. We are sending so many copies to the underworld. It is insane. Yeah, it's blowing my mind. And you've contributed a bunch of stuff to the book. I mean, you've been there almost since day one, right?
I agree.
Pretty
I think
much.
so.
Yeah. In the most recent one, you have an amazing poem. I want to know, Skobie, can you pull that up real quick?
Yeah, let me find the page. Hold
on. Okay, I thought you were.
Well, I can't. It doesn't. I'm still learning this whole fucking thing, but I remember what page it is, dude.
Oh, there it is. Look at that.
Yes.
Don't hit the remove. Hit the I guess the opposite one of that.
Why does it want to do that?
Come on, what are you doing, John?
Hold on. We got to do present. Hold on. We're figuring this out on the fly.
Look at us doing improv. Yes, and that's yes, and that's the button you click.
No.
Oh, did we do it? Oh, this is embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing.
No, we're blowing it. No. So when I went to clown school, I got really good at doing the clown act where you juggle but you mess up, and then you juggle but you mess up a different way, and then you juggle and you mess up a different way until the audience realize that's the bit, and then you get more and more elaborate with the ways that you mess up, and eventually you're doing pratfalls and backflips, and it's
there we
it's
go.
very gymnastic. Look at that. Look how.
Oh, that is awesome.
Funny button clicks.
Can somebody in the live chat down here confirm that you can see that? Is that a thumbs up? We can see that coming through.
Yeah, I got you.
Look at that.
Brothers back to Grandpa.
Oh.
So anyway, I love this particular piece because it's just smack dab right there in the Chorus of Frogs. And the point of the Chorus of Frogs section is that it's that hermetic ritual where you just need to just kind of sandpaper through the first third, and then you get into the good stuff. You know what I mean? It gets you through that change. So with our audience, we kind of did that, but in a 3-course meal. So it's a little bit of it's a little ironic. So the first offering in the 3-course meal is the Chorus of Frogs. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind reading to this to the audience, and we can kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let me bring up my screen a little larger here. Here we go. Okay. So this is the hymn to Talia. So before I begin, I'll just explain who Talia is. Talia is one of the 9 classical muses, the Heliconian muses of Homer, and she specifically is the muse of comedy. And I've been doing a long form work project where it's called the Hymns to the Muses. In one of the sections, I do a hymn to each of the 9. And so I was going through them all. And Talia, this one really stood out to me, because comedy is such an intense magical action. And those of us who study the Hellenic tradition and the birth of comedy recognize that comedy is this Dionysian liberating force. And that's how it was intended and seen within the original theatrical tradition. It's important to recognize that comedy was first performed at the Dionysia for the rites of Dionysus, and it was performed to undermine power, right? It was performed to undermine power. It began, we've had 7 or 8 talks on this now, between discussing books, between discussing your books, or just hanging out, you and I, Mandy, or with your brother Skobie. But it's, we can't say this enough. It's like, it comes out of youthful shit talking, trying to shaming people into joining in the party, people who weren't drinking, people who weren't celebrating. But it becomes this whole way for grievance. It's kind of like what the dude bros of the comedy world see themselves as and fail utterly to be is what people like Aristophanes actually were. So I really wanted to highlight that power of the comedic tradition in the way that Lucian and Aristophanes saw it, as this way to challenge authority and to bring that liberating force of Dionysus to challenge the status quo, not to tear everything down, right? Everything is meant to be done in balance. You need Dionysus and Hera, but sometimes you got to bring in that liberating force. Otherwise, things stagnate. And comedy, it shows people their ass. You know, every magician is an ass, and we all
That's
need to see
fucking-
behind the curtain sometimes, you know, and recognize the performance. You know, it's all bullshit at the end of the day to a certain extent. So let's read the poem. Now I've set it up.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
So it's flourishing fecundity, joyous beauty, blossoming with enduring renewal along the serpentine streams of eternity. In an air of laughter, she dons the comic mask. With a blaze of her trumpet, you are revealed to be an ass. With mimicry and mockery, ridicule and satire, she exposes all hypocrisy and topples any empire. With ecstasy and gaiety, jubilation and mirth, she subdues our animal energy and brings justice to the earth. You know, so it's this idea that sometimes you got to expose the hypocrisy of people, because people get so caught up in their own BS they can't, you know, and that's the nature of this. And there's a real beauty to that kind of comedy as justice, you know.
I love it, Snappy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that looks cool.
I love the chorus of frogs that you know we've built together over the past year. You know, it's mind blowing that we were able to put out the first 5 volumes. I thought we just had this crazy idea. I was like, yeah, we'll do 1 and see how it goes.
You thought.
And we just kept going and going and going, and like the contribution just kept getting better and better and better. And like, you know, people that I don't even know like at all in any way, shape, or form, just like as a name in the comment section,
right,
over the years, have contributed stuff that just blew my mind. I went, this is so cool. Like, what do you want to call yourself for your pen name? And like the name they used in the comment section isn't the same name that they used,
right,
you know, in the book. So like, you know, just encouraging people to just get it out. You know what I mean? You have a platform that you can publish it. You can be one of the frogs annoying Dionysus on their trip with us, you know? And, you know, we were talking to Tiger Shark because apparently he has something to do with stars or planets or something, and lightning alabastrums and all sorts of crazy shit. But, you know, we were saying that, you know, Lucian took his audience to the moon, whereas we're taking our audience to Mars and back in the future as well as in the past, right? So we're doing it, you know, proper hyperstition, because a lot of the problems with previous forms of hyperstition was they were
fascist.
Yeah, they were doing meth, right? They were doing meth.
They were.
So it was all just fascist bullshit, methy nonsense, right? They weren't doing the entheogens properly because they didn't have the concept of entheogens. They had, you know, just fashy bullshit, and that you know, if you have that as your mindset, it's never going to work for you. You know what I mean?
Can
like,
you take a little bit of meth and then a little bit of entheogen and like balance it out?
No, Nazi magic is bad, man. Nazi magic is no good.
I've never done any of it. I'm just asking.
And honestly, Molly is just Nazi magic for serotonin.
Oh, okay.
So stay away from it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to avoid that. I love that we've built a book that's like explicitly and like implicitly anti-fascist, and like, you know,
I mean, it's okay to punch Nazis.
It's a way to punch Nazis, and we're advocating for the rebirth of a matriarchal society through Dionysian rituals, you know. And like, you know,
what my favorite part of just what happened is I looked away to the screen and I thought that Grandpa Letter just said that. So like that's because that sounds like something you would say.
Well, so here's the thing: is that we're all just like, as a community, have this same mindset inherently. So we're all basically writing about the same thing in different ways. And the beautiful part about the book is that, you know, we understand the purpose of that first third of any writing in a hermetic ritual, where it's designed as like sandpaper for your mind, so that you come out without the bad preconceived notions that you had previously, so you can appreciate the rest of the text as though you've been reborn, right? So like, Hegel does this in the Phenomenology of the Spirit, right? The first third of that book is damn near unreadable, and then it gets into the really good stuff, and he holds your hand through it as though you're a baby, and then, you know, starts to assume things as though you're a teenager, and then assumes different things as though you're an adult, and takes you through that process as like performance art on the page that he wrote on the toilet, right? Like Hegel wrote Phenomenology of the Spirit on the toilet.
Can you confirm that? Were you there?
So here's the thing: is that we were explaining previously that we confirmed our book right now, the one that just came out, the Towel of Minerva, Volume 1, Book 2, has a necromantic ritual that is confirmed to be able to do necromancy and commune with people in the past. Now, it's an initiation ritual. It's a two-part. It requires two groups to do. One part does the ritual, the other does the communion and can speak with the with those that are being returned into catabasis. But it's implied that they go back down, just like we did earlier with Dr. James Hillman.
I just want to also though challenge Hegel. You always loved Hegel, but as a Muse follower, I got to bring in Goethe, who is clearly better than Hegel. I'm very sorry. And Hegel has, Hegel was one of my favorite anecdotes that Goethe used to expose the ridiculousness of Hegel is he brought his 14-year-old daughter or his 13-year-old cousin, who was a young girl with him, to a party and said, "What do you think of Hegel?" And said, "Just let him talk to you for several hours." And then after that, he went and asked her, "What did you think?" And he's like, she's just like, "It was utter bullshit." He sounded like a total pomp. And he just spoke over me and interrupted me the entire time. And he then told this to Hegel, who got so upset, he stormed out of the room. And Goethe's whole thing is, if you can't explain it, your philosophy, to my 14-year-old daughter or my 14-year-old cousin, who's educated by me, then I don't care what you got to say.
Yeah, he was one of the most brilliant bullshit artists that has ever done it. And he sparked what I call the German silly billy school of philosophy, where like people were in the room when Hegel was lecturing and recognized this about him. And when he did his lectures on art, which were then collected by his students into a book, I think it's I don't know. It's his one on art or whatever. And he explains in that book that he's a satirist and he's contributed things under different pen names to satire contests that like at the time were popular to be run in the newspaper. And there's actually one of these that you can look up. It's called Who Thinks Abstractly? And he says right in there, those with astute noses can recognize the humor and the satire at this moment. And then like he like breaks the fourth wall, says, "Hey, I'm Hegel, right? This is under my real name for the newspaper for this satire contest. If you can smell what I'm doing, this will be really funny, right? If I don't win, that proves my point, right? This is Hegel's thing. And this is his contribution to this satire contest. It's so funny when you realize like the philosophical joke that's going on there, where it's the snake eating its own tail, right? It's not a circular argument, it's an aristic argument, right?
Like so much of okay. I mean, I got my master's in philosophy, Indian philosophy, but I had to deal with so much of this BS. And you get to a certain point in philosophy where it's just like you're arguing in circles, and everything becomes like Hegel is the penultimate, like the ultimate expression of this kind of linguistic, hyper. He basically rewrites the German language. You can't understand Hegel unless you have learned how to read Hegel first, And I, at that point, I'm like, your philosophy becomes so abstract. What are you even talking about?
Yeah, and people can read Hegel and write about Hegel, do entire PhDs, get their dissertation in Hegel, live their entire lives and die without anyone ever telling them, "Hey, Hegel wrote that on the toilet. He's doing satire, or he's doing this like silly performance ritual on the page," right? Like
this is one of the things with philosophy. Like to me, the modern Hegelian kind of height of Hegelianism right now in the modern sphere would be Slavoj Žižek. And just look at him, the way he talks, and he's just spewing nonsense half the time. And he'll even admit to you.
I love that video you sent me of his. That was great.
Which one?
Yeah. That was just such beautiful absurdism. Oh.
Yeah, that's such a good one. But yeah, Hegelianism. I love philosophy, But what I like about what we are trying to do here is we're trying to expose the ridiculousness of it all and how silly it all is and how people have turned it into something of this like heights of absolute, perfection of thought. Like people put someone like Nietzsche on a pedestal and act like he's a god. And this was a crazy guy who had syphilis and literally just wrote satire, and he never wanted to be that kind of famous. And, I don't know. He didn't have that great of ideas anyway. Like, look at his racial shit. It's fucking, I know he's not a racist in the way that the neo-Nazis wanted him to be, but you can read his own work.
He's still a late romantic German, though.
Yeah, he's still a late romantic German, a good way to point it. He's still a product of his time, and he's still framing the world in this kind of like Roman versus Jewish lens, which is such a like, he does also refine that lens that we love so much, the Dionysian versus the Apollonian. But I even find this to be limited. I don't think it accurately describes the Apollonian. You need a further demarcation for the Saturnian, because I see this as 3 stages that we see, and you could apply this kind of cyclical stages to just about any cultural product that lives, any meme in existence, it goes through a Dionysian revelry, then it enters into an Apollonian refinement where it achieves its heights of beauty, and then it becomes this Saturnian other that tries to maintain its power and consume its children until it no longer becomes relevant. Perfect examples. We can all see this within our own lifetime with music. We all watched, and we can all look at that history. Rock is born in the 50s and the 60s, and Dionysian revelry, Then by the 70s and the 80s, it enters into that Prague height of Apollonian refinement. By the 2000s, it's irrelevant in trying to shit all over hip hop and telling us that hip hop is garbage, and that we should, and now it's irrelevant.
Meanwhile, we're sampling prog rock. People like me sample prog rock all the time, so it's fucking hilarious.
But now we're watching the same thing, to me, Kendrick Lamar and this attack on, even though Drake is very much the pop rap and he deserves to be shut down. Yeah. To me, I look at this moment as the Saturnian transition. Now you have created an ideal. Now you have manifested the perfection. And now it's about cutting away which no longer is hip hop. And as soon as you start doing that, now you're doing what rock did before it, and you're on your path to irrelevancy.
I love that you said that, because a lot of people who are in my age group don't like Kendrick Lamar, because I think they don't understand what he's doing with his different voices and his different characters, and it's very similar to what Eminem did, but in a different light. And I think it's over a lot of people's heads, because Kendrick never actually talks about it, whereas Eminem would talk about his different characters. And I think that in a way, I'm just diverting, but in a way, I think Kendrick is doing a good thing by keeping the mystery alive. By you know what I mean?
Really. So when you're looking at any kind of subculture,
you
got to look at it from within the lens of the subculture. Kendrick Lamar is the manifestation of hip hop. He is the Apollonian height of hip hop. And what I mean by that is this is an underground artist who took the underground form and managed to make it mainstream. He took what people like Black Thought and MF Doom were doing and made it palatable to the club, in a way that we've never seen before. And then he also used that to challenge pop rap and to reassert the culture, So this is an incredible Apollonian moment, but it also signals now you've created the height. Now you've set the demarcation and you've decided what no longer is hip hop, what is no longer acceptable. It's the same thing as saying disco sucks. This is part of the end, Now that you've created the height, now that you've created a Beethoven or a Mozart, who else can ever achieve that? It becomes, this weird thing now. And it's also, you're consuming your children. Drake is a product of hip hop, and now hip hop has killed him,
Yeah.
So it's very much a Saturnian turn.
I think it's happened a couple of times, and that Kendrick just happens to be the most latest example of what's going of the turn. Do you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying, but I don't feel like we've seen the Apollonian height moment until Kendrick. And what I mean by this is that in the 90s, you got the height in terms of mass appeal,
Sure.
right? In terms of like people like P. Diddy cracked the formula. If I steal popular music and put a famous modern person over it, we can make $1 billion. That is not art. That's capitalism, you know? And so hip hop started to make money, but it hadn't achieved that pinnacle of art yet. It started to in the underground. People who were turned on, like Mandy, would have seen this, but the mainstream hadn't seen it. Kendrick Lamar not only marks where the mainstream has seen it, where the mainstream is celebrating. He won the fucking Pulitzer. You know, everyone is now admitting that this is the height of rapdom, you know?
Right. Yeah, damn.
As soon as you say that, you've ruined it. Now you've achieved the height.
Damn was an incredible album, and it winning a Pulitzer Prize was just phenomenal. So
and that's the closest thing. That's the closest thing that we have to honoring somebody who has a way of communing with Calliope. It's like the closest thing we got, right? And that says something, but like also, Calliope was Orpheus's mom. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then we all know how that story goes. You know what I mean? You don't look back. What do you do, right? Because you keep leaving all these boulders as you're going up that hill, right? And those boulders that Sisyphus in this metaphor I'm building that are carrying and walking up, right? He's carrying, boulders that are essentially made from other people that looked back. You know what I mean? And then boom, you're just leaving these stone bodies that the next Sisyphus has to walk up even higher and higher and higher and higher as you're setting this high Apollonian standard, right? It really kind of it's not forward thinking and it's not life affirming, right? It's not it's not the Dionysian has a
liberating generative view. It's not about
egalitarian. It's egalitarian, right?
Yeah.
That's why these rap battles were organic, right? They just happen when like two people meet each other and then they do a little bit of poetry back and forth because that's the way that these cultures interacted. It's like, oh yeah, we do poetry this way over in our village. We're at this Dionysian festival. Our parents are in that tent doing things. We're out here making sure the pirates don't steal us. We're doing rap battles, right? And like everybody gathers around in a circle and do rap battles back and forth. At the end of Aristophanes' Frogs, this is depicted, right? Like Aristophanes
this is what I mean, though.
Like, brought it to the stage, right? So Aristophanes was like that. He was trying to depict as being Dionysian, but it wasn't. He was trying to depict the inauthenticity of trying to do the Dionysian thing that was the tradition of the streets on the stage, right? Because that tradition comes out of Greek mime, not Dionysian theater.
Aristophanes, if you read Birds, he shows you how to do the Apollonian way too. He shows you both.
Yeah.
Frogs shows you how to go the Dionysian path, how to enter the underworld, and Birds shows you how to build the temple of the ideal and how to, ascend to the heights and contact the virgin muse. It's two different paths, but the same ultimate goal. But going back to this kind of rap stuff and whatnot, again, we see in its raps in its beginning, it has that Dionysian element. It's born on the streets. We're instead of engaging in gunplay, let's fight each other on the rap battles. And we see this when we did our satire talk. We saw this in dozens of cultures: Islamic culture, Gaelic culture, Roman culture. This is something that people have done since time immemorial. Try to challenge each other through speech, whether it's dozens or whether it's poetry, doesn't matter. But what we see though with someone like now, with like a Kendrick Lamar, this has become such a commoditized thing. And it wasn't just like, this wasn't an organic rap beef. These were highly produced tracks that were then promoted by UMC. And that is where things get wild, because even remember, like when I was a kid, the big beef was between fucking Jay-Z and Nas. Everyone was flipping out over that beef.
Yep.
No record label was pushing that. That was all underground shit. You had to know someone who had the tapes. You weren't picking that up at your record store. You know, it's a totally different world though now. Capital has taken it all over, which is why Drake was even able to try and sue. It was beyond stupid. But the only reason he could is because Capital has now changed it into something completely different. It's no longer the culture. And this is the thing. Even as we celebrate the culture and we turn Kendrick into this icon of the culture, he's become devoid of the culture at the same time. By iconizing him, by making him to that heights, you've now removed it. You've destroyed the competition too. Like the whole point of hip hop is competition. How do you compete with that image now? You know, how do you compete with Kendrick? You can't. It's become, it's silly now.
Well, that's like the farceness of rap, though. Is like it is a competition, but there is no competition. Does that make sense? It's like this. It's like a fake competition. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until it gets real. Until
it gets real.
You got me. Yeah, right there.
You know, and it's all about braggadociousness, showing each other up. But you see this in music in general is kind of a competition. And that's kind of what leads to refinement and height and intensity. You know, you see this in the jazz scene in the 70s, you know, which I was really into for a long time. In reggae music, you see this to the nth flipping degree. It's like a very human thing. We go through these cycles. But once you start to enter that refinement, then you also start to define what your box is to a point now. How the beauty of an artistic box is you've created an artificial set of rules that you can bend and a language through which people can understand. But what happens when you've bent that box completely out of shape and now you're trapped within it? You know, when everyone has said everything that needs to be said, you know, it's like eventually people are going to put down the guitar and pick up a new instrument. they're going to stop.
So you build a new box.
Else, you know?
Yeah.
So
I would say that you know, Mandy Skobie and myself experienced that firsthand when we were growing up and going to shows in New London, Connecticut, and there was a punk band that were a bunch of Republicans singing a song about how punker than they were than everybody else with their, you know, all their steez and their punk rockness. But again, one of them had like the US flag unironically tattooed on his arm so he could like show off to his buddies, and had his own band that sang another song called Bombs Not Food. And, you know, it was definitely interesting to see something that was kind of a good time get radicalized in such a not fun way.
Well, because
grew up on that shit too. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that person was counterculture to the culture they were within, so he thought that he was fucking cool within the counterculture, you know, and it's just
the cool kids club in the cool kids club in the cool kids club.
It's always shitheads like this, you know. When I was growing up, I was all about the ska and reggae thing, and where I grew up was skinhead. Everyone, you know, just how I grew up, you know. Now looking back on it, I'm like, I probably should never have joined up with that stuff. But you don't think very smart when you're 14. You look at your friends, you know, and that's what it was. But the skinhead kind of ska thing that I was into was racially inclusive and progressive, largely about socialist politics and anarchist politics. It was the most radical shit ever. It was all ages shows, people coming together and having a good time, you know. But then all of a sudden it turned. And those same people with the skinheads were showing up with white laces on their boots and picking fights with the brown kids. And then it turned into tribal warfare and going to jail for stupid kid fighting. I'm lucky I didn't like get my shit kicked or wind up in jail, you know, over nonsense, right?
That makes two of us.
You know, it gets so stupid. And it's just punk rock and ska music, and like people are just trying to shit talk each other and be idiots. It was always like half of those skinhead guys, they were just trying to be the tougher than thou guy. They liked the military image. They wanted to make people afraid of them. It had nothing to do with anything real, you know? But at the same And if you don't protect your spaces, those people run over everything. I watched several bars where we would go to shows who didn't shut out the Nazi skins, and then all of a sudden, only Nazis went to the fucking bar, and no one else did.
And that's the beautiful thing about the type of satire that me and Grandpa Leather were doing back in the day. And I love that Grandpa Leather's here for this story because on Snappy Show was the first time I revealed this to the public, but I invented Rickrolling.
Yep, I remember.
as an esoteric punk rock joke where we were I went to a show and I saw the band 25 to Life and I absolutely fucking hated them. It was so bad, right? And then I started making these fake 25 to Life cassette tapes where it was one song 25 to Life and then the rest of the cassette was Never Gonna Give You Up on loop, right? So
you gotta put in though, like people need to understand how much of a shit Rick to Life is.
Yeah.
And how like that New York hardcore scene is such a weird scene in general. As much as I like that kind of music to a certain extent, but like Rick to Life was the biggest chud in the scene. He had the most tattoos, he was the most intense, and he was the worst musician. Look him up on YouTube, just search Rick to Life vocals, and you will cringe like you'll never cringe before. And the dude was always trying to make his band relevant or kiss ass, and then he just wound up falling into racist bullshit. He didn't always start out as racist. He's just so it's even worse in some ways because he's a bloody grifter and a total rapist. Like there are dozens of women who have complained about this man, and he still gets away with it in the punk scene. It's awful.
Yeah, it's fucked up. And
Yeah.
I used to do that same sort of bait and switch trick, that ended up turning into Rick rolling when I took it to 4chan because I was of that age where I took that joke to 4chan and started Rick rolling people on there, and then they did it at the Thanksgiving parade or whatever. That was crazy, but that just blew up, and that was a joke within the punk rock scene that I just kept doing and doing and doing. But I would also do it on like LimeWire and Kazaa, right, where you could download songs and stuff. So if people were to try to download songs from the band Screwdriver, they would end up getting songs from the band Swerve Driver without knowing it. So they're trying to get this Nazi punk band, but they end up getting shoegaze. Really, really fun prank that I used to play on Nazis. So fast forward like 15 years, and Johnny and I have a buddy that works for Kanye West in one capacity or another.
Yep.
And Kanye goes, "Hey, I'm going to sample this band for my next album. I've already sampled like some black metal stuff. I want to sample this. It's called Screwdriver." And he hits play, and it's the band Swerve Driver. So I played this prank on Nazis 15 years ago, and it pays off with Kanye West now. Fucking chef's kiss of a chaos apple that I chucked out there, and this prank that was Rick rolling, that's such a fun little chaos apple. If you were the type of person to pick up that cassette tape that's on the back of the toilet at the club that says 25 to Life, Jamie Josta on bass, guest trumpet by so-and-so, 1994, and you leave that on the back of the toilet, right? If you put that in, you get one song. How many people do you think in the entire world have made it through one song of 25 to Life to get the pranks for it to pay off, right?
I can't imagine who could live through a full song of 20. I'm serious. Go Google Rick to Life. I love hardcore, and I can't even do it. I can't do it. It's like, he sounds like a dying frog. Like I don't know why. Like I don't know how he got famous, even within such a niche thing as hardcore.
Oh, it's so bad, and I love that Grandpa Leather was there and had witnessed this, and it actually that came out of one of the communions with the iguana ducks. So
all you had to do was ask the same question 3 times.
All you need to do is ask the same question 3 times to the iguana ducks, and they'll give you a nonsense answer.
But I wanted to ask, I heard you
3 times. Call that.
I heard you asking questions earlier of everyone about monism versus Trinitarianism.
Oh, that was how many penises the Cerberus have? 1 or 3. Or you a Trinitarian?
Oh, I thought you were really getting into the philosophy there.
Well, so we're sort of we're doing those the satirical snares and traps where you're kind of sending your audience on it's giving them a red herring, you know, and it's inspired a lot of creative answers, and I love it. But you know, it is a red herring, and a red herring was a thing that you used to do to dogs to keep them on the path, right? You would put these fish, you know, and that was was it Artemis that would, you know, the hunt, right? So what she would do to make sure the dogs were always on the same path was to put fish in the trees, because that would distract them when they were young, and then, you know, it would train them to focus on the thing that they are supposed to be smelling, right? So they don't get rewarded if they get the red herring. They do get rewarded when they get the duck, right, or the deer, or whatever that Artemis was, you know, training them to
Can you
hunt.
say your sources?
No, it's a.
I just bring it up because there's a lot of, I wanted to talk about some of this stuff because in terms of the philosophy, there's a lot of confusion and frustration in the Greco-Roman tradition, especially from the way that like I present it or Ammon presents it. You know, Ammon is constantly raging against monism, and then people get frustrated because he talks about this idea of the Great Mother, and he's like, well, that sounds like monism, you know? And I think a lot of this comes out of just a misconstruing of terms and not a rigorous understanding of philosophy. And I don't mean this in a way to crap on people, but most people don't study religious philosophy. And I didn't understand this fully until I went to India. And I was studying, there's this one philosopher called Abhinavagupta, who's a Shaivite philosopher. And his main idea that he comes up with, we call either qualified monism or qualified polytheism. Depends on who's writing about it. They both mean the same thing. But the idea is both are true. It's the one and the many. The Great Mother is the cosmic womb that gives birth to all form, and we're all united in that image to which we will all return to source. But also, the infinite diversity is equally as real, and it is valid. And there's this moment in the understanding where after you recognize the unity, you then have to confront the absurdity that the illusion of difference is still there, and it's not going anywhere. And life is about this generation. You got to balance the Apollonian and the Dionysian. You know, so much of a religious tradition in the way we phrase things is from this Apollonian perspective of becoming the rebus, of forming the divine androgyne and returning to this one. But that's one aspect of the path, and ultimately not even the path we're mostly meant to take in our life. We're meant to embrace the generative path of creation and self-refinement, to go through the cycles of death and rebirth and evolve. And eventually you return back to source. But this is where people get so frustrated in this. You know, it is a Trinitarian ideology in that it expands in that Trinitarian view from a singular source, but that source is the totality of all creation. It is a monistic perspective, but it also embraces the separation. It's like it's an absurdity. It's Dionysian. How do you reconcile?
But I think you're talking about the middle way, right? The middle way is the only way, right? Like
absolutely. You have to have both. You have to see both the one and the many.
Right.
Right. You know, both are true. We're all united. We all come from a single source, you know, but we're also all in infinite expansion. And the whole purpose of the universe is to constantly generate and change, to generate new form. And that's the essence of Dionysus, right?
Damn snappy.
And that's one of the things that we really try to drive home about why Hecate, when she goes to the underworld, is Cerberus. Because when Persephone was taken to the underworld, Hecate could sense her the entire time, right? And the thing that we know from Heraclitus is that when souls are in the underworld, they perceive with their sense of smell. So Cerberus, being her soul in the underworld as a three-headed dog, has three noses to perceive Persephone at all times, right? And knows that she's keeping Persephone, you know, safe from harm and all of that, right? One of the interesting things, the main takeaway that's in the Hecatean tradition, is that Hecate is the moon and simultaneously the cave that the moon sleeps in.
Interesting,
right? The two witnesses to Persephone's kidnapping were Helios and Hecate. The moon and simultaneously the cave in which the moon sleeps when Helios is out.
And who's the reporter on the moon being in the cave?
What?
That's just me being Apollonian. Plato. We're talking about Plato. Plato's the only one who reports the shadow on the cave and the.
Oh,
Yeah.
you took it to Plato's
Yes,
cave.
I did,
I
yeah.
wasn't even going there.
Yeah, I
That's
don't know.
amazing,
I've thought
Johnny.
about this for
No,
a while,
Johnny,
actually.
that's amazing. You actually made like
You're welcome.
cool connections. Can you write about that for the next volume of the
Yes.
book? Write about the connection to the moon being Hecate and Hecate casting shadows on the. That's
Because
amazing.
I play this
Johnny.
game with my son before he goes to bed every day. I bring my phone up and it's closer. The shadow gets smaller and it gets bigger, and he just loves it and he thinks it's cool. And
So check this out. If Hecate is casting a shadow of Cerberus on the cave,
right,
you never see Cerberus's
Never.
genitalia, so you
Yes.
don't authentically know the answer to the question.
because
It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
If you're only seeing the shadow of Cerberus on the cave. Johnny, you just did that thing where you channel the muses. We just did art.
You're welcome.
That's what's called art. That was a
Love you,
beautiful
Johnny.
thing.
But it's interesting that you bring up this idea of the shadow of the cave, because we see this in another more explicit way. Who is the goddess that is the first and the last? It is the virgin Hestia, who is what? She is the hearth. And this is really interesting because in the Greek tradition, they do not have animistic gods except for Hestia. She is the embodied hearth. Her name means hearth. She is the literal oven, the place where they would go to cook. And in the earliest iterations of these stories, she is the firstborn and she's the last consumed. And
Really?
Yeah. And so even in the tarot, you see her, she is both the fool and the universe, the beginning and the end. It starts with this spark. And again, Hecate, that Hecate image, you got to see it through this power of the sacrifice. You know, there's all this stuff about Hecate that comes through. One of the wild things when you read people like Ruck, or you read some of the classicists, you go to the engravings, you'll notice is that people become Hecate, specifically young virgin girls who die, usually in sacrifice, in defense, for a purpose. They become transmuted into Hecate. And you'll see this constantly. Iphigenia goes to Torre, and then what happens? She becomes the head of an Artemis temple, and she is the queen there. Hecate power, right? What happens to it's constant. What happens to Helen? In one of the iterations of the Helen story, she never actually goes. She never goes to Troy. Instead, she is occulted, taken to Egypt, where she learns the secret rites of Isis, and a mirror of herself, an image, an illusion is brought to Troy. So in the end, they're not even fighting over a real woman. They're fighting over the image of a woman, at Troy. But what I mean, though, is like there's this whole thing about that power of the sacrifice, of the giving of the self. You know, Hestia in the mythology, she sacrifices her procreative power in order to become the hearth, to tend to the fire in the flame of generation. And then she becomes that procreative force of a non-sexual kind. She's the one that generates food, that transforms things through the heating, the alchemical process. Is that transformative heart, the heart of the home. Also, it's the beginning of democracy. The community starts where you light that fire, right? Everything begins with that fire and the coming together. And that's the essence of all of this kind of tradition. And to create new ideas and forms, to produce that generation.
And I do want to say, in honor of Hecate, Grandpa just texted me and said he has to go and take a shit.
That's when I took him off the chat.
Yes,
I saw he had to disappear.
Hecate is the one who eats filth.
Yes. The Greek word for shit is one of her names.
Yeah,
and it's also one of the code word to get into the underworld. It's one of the
What word? Hold on, I need to know this word. Word.
I have to look it up. It's Boro.
Yeah, it's Boroboros.
Oh, Boroboros. Yes, I've heard.
Yeah,
that
it's Greek for shit.
She who eats filth. Let me look this up.
Yeah, and it's one of the passwords to the underworld.
Boroforba, eater of filth. Boroforba.
Yep.
Boroba.
What up, Tiger Shark?
Yo, we go to the underworld? What happened?
I
Let's
was just
go.
thinking. I was reading a paper. They found a Viking coprolite. You know what a coprolite is?
It's,
Yes.
Oh yeah, dude. How's it smell? Is it still stanky?
please tell us.
I'm interested to see what they say about it because they're supposed to tell they're like, oh, we can tell the diet and if they were drinking a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
Oh, they were drinking some fun alcohols. I can tell you that.
Almost certainly. But like that Hecate goddess is such an interesting goddess when you look at it in the tradition because it evolves and changes so many times and is so complicated and gets so wild. Like if you read Diodorus Siculus, the library, for example, she is the wife of Aeetes, the queen of Colchis. And they tell us that she's the one who institutes the rites of impalement. So this was any time a foreigner would land on the shores of Colchis, they would take them and they'd pale them on sticks. And then they tell us that she would also take some of these people and not, instead of killing them, would do experiments on them.
Oh.
And this is where she developed the naphtha, the fire, and the magic to also prevent the death of fire.
Jeez.
And it is through all of these rites that Medea then later takes that magic and she refines it and creates the saving magic. But it's out of this vile magic of warfare and torture and destruction that it is born. And most people don't recognize, like Hecate, they all see Hecate as this, in the modern time, she's usually considered the crone and the goddess of magic. But in the earliest traditions, she's either the queen of Aeetes or she is the virgin runner at Eleusis. She's the young girl who holds the torches, who guides Demeter to the underworld, right? Who guides her to Helios. She carries the spark of Helios so that they can find their way home. And that's her role, is she travels between the three realms, and she's that guiding light, But it's also then later on she becomes this, we've talked about this, Mandy, where they develop at the crossroads, they have these places where they would make offerings to Hecate, where you would leave these cakes for the dogs, but also for the poor. And this later becomes this whole feasting thing where Hecate's cult gives the food for the poor and manages the earliest soup kitchens in Greece and in Rome. So on one hand, this is the goddess of destructive evil magic and killing, but she's also the one that's like giving you the soup kitchen. It's like weird. There's so much complicated stuff to this. And then as the tradition goes, like we said, that virgin aspect gets completely removed. And she becomes this godmother of the moon, the crone, and associated specifically with the new moon. But in the earliest traditions, it's not even a lunar aspect. It's this crossing of the threshold aspect that is her central thing. And then, or this queen of Colchis is this monstrous destructor. It's really interesting.
And she trains a lot of the women that are depicted as sorceress or witches, or
they're all worshiping Hecate. Even Medea worships Hecate.
Exactly.
You're worshiping your mom?
yeah, right. But there's understanding that what we have as words that are written down were written down in a patriarchal tradition. The performers on stage that would have been doing this stuff, right? A lot of the stage instructions aren't recorded, right? So you would have people that were like slaves or traveling performers that relied on these soup kitchens to go from performance to performance to festival to get where they were, right? You had Tiger Shark talks a lot about the Silk Road, right? So within the Silk Road, you would have these little loops that people would have performances and stuff. So you'd have a ritual every month, and you would go from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, and that's how some of the stuff from the Silk Road would get down into different places. Was these other roads that were also places that rituals happened once a month, right? I just think it's interesting how it's sort of it really interconnects right there. And a lot of the people that were performing on stage were former slaves that needed to basically work for their meal, right? So they were hired by private shows, which are really demeaning, right? because you have to really like play it up to, you know, the people that are essentially used to be your oppressors and now you're begging for your dinner to get paid, right? They were looked at the same way as the cooks that were at the festival were the actors, and oftentimes sometimes the cooks were the actors, right? Like the cooks were like part of the performances was the service of the food, right? The offering, you know, which we know satire is the mixed plate at a Dionysian festival, right? So you have to go, well, where at the Dionysian festival is this mixed plate being offered? Because the way you offer that plate is different depending on where you are at the festival. If you're a young kid that isn't in the adult tent, the way that you offer this mixed plate is by mixing your culture's poetry battle with, you know, somebody who is from a different village that you interact with, that you know, and if you won the battle, you were able to put your family's towel or insignia on the tree or on the post, right?
Yeah.
So that's like part of the way that you won this tradition. And meanwhile, you have your parents who, depending on their social situation, were in an adult tent doing certain things depending on their situation. So, you know, the situation of the people that are being projected, the way that we have things that are recorded, it's all very, very like convoluted and difficult to sparse out. But one of the things that we try to encourage in the book is like find a character that connects with you in one of this mythology, and do like just trace them through as many different texts as you can find, right? That's what I did with Cerberus. And, you know, what really inspired me to do that was reading Carl Ruck and seeing that he was, you know, in a footnote, he said that Cerberus is the one that found the Murex dye and it stained Cerberus's mouth, right? And, you know, that's really cool. I was like, oh, I found that in Ruck. And then, like, you know, all this stuff fell into my lap, and I just like kind of took that idea and kind of ran with it, where I was just playing with, like, you know, what else does Ruck have to say about Cerberus? What does everybody else have to say about Cerberus?
Yeah, that's in the Herculean myth, right?
Yeah. So, you know, Hercules, and he's just called Hercules' dog, and Hercules' dog finds the Murex, stains Hercules' dog's mouth.
That's even on though. That's like that's such an important image because, like, for example, modern day Palestine, but this would have been, what is that ancient city? But they had a coin. They had Ashkelon. They have a coin with Hercules and his dog getting the Murex dye. Right? Like that, like this, and it's such an important image, you know.
And also, you know, when Cerberus comes up, the foam from Cerberus's mouth goes on the ground, and that's how Hecate gets henbane. So what we're proposing in the book is that there's a Hecatean tradition that runs through this Homeric stuff that is being missed, because that's the satire, right? It's all a prank that Hecate plays on Hercules to get Hercules to bring Cerberus to the surface to get the henbane. So it's an elaborate prank, right? It's just like, we're gonna exhaust Hercules and just go through these things and blah 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 blah, and just pepper in all this Hecatean stuff that if you're not within the Hecatean tradition in the audience, you're going to overlook, right? That's why it ends with, you know, the last trial is bringing Cerberus to the surface so that the spume, you know, goes on the ground, and that's how you get henbane. Simultaneously, the purple from the shell, right? And so, you know, it's not a coincidence, as the Jungian people would like to say. You know, that's too convenient for that to be something that me as a satirist looking for all this silly stuff that that other satirists said about Cerberus.
But even not
not
even satire is like one of the things you got me looped into was Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations. He says that their purple cloaks are dyed from shellfish, right? He says this in Meditations in one of the verses. And I said, Mandy, sorry. I said, Mandy, like, how do you tie these things together? Like, I was immediately interested because I read Meditations years ago, before there was an almond, before there was any of this shit. And, you know, he clued me into this stuff. I said, purple, dyed purple from the shellfish? Like, hold on, you had me at hello, you know, like, because
all of the colors are drugs.
Right.
Mhm.
But I wasn't even getting to drugs. I'm just getting at like he said the color purple came from shellfish in his meditations, which was his like fucking his whatever diary, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And this is published to fucking like football players. All these people read these things, and I remember hearing it and going, what the fuck? Hold on, there's a connection that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. Like,
What's the color of the bag for the Crown Royal?
purple.
There you go.
Yeah,
See,
purple.
That's why
I mean,
that's
like
this tradition.
I think there's just some like connected like thread that could be like
so
that
there's
you guys are tying together.
So
that could be
this thread here that
threaded.
you're tying together,
threaded,
the towel,
yes.
the towel of Minerva.
The
We
towel of
explained
Minerva,
this.
yes,
That's what the towel that Minerva is giving us from Mars in the year 3030, right? So sort of some of the backstories of people who are just now not totally in on all the inside jokes. Medea, she's on a 3-year journey from Earth to Mars,
correct,
so that she can attend the Deltron 3030 festival.
3030
right?
festival. Yep.
So she leaves the year
3027.
Exactly, right? 3 years prior, because it's a 3-year journey. One of the things that we really like to stress is it's so important for everybody to understand. And you can just take this mantra and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. It is easier to imagine the end of capitalism than it is to imagine an authentically matriarchal society.
Agreed.
Okay. It's very, very important. Take that, let that fester, let that ferment, because it gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter the more that you chew the book with that in your teeth, and you can get that post-nasal aroma while you're chewing on all of this stuff.
Well, but unless you're from
so here's what I was trying to say.
Go ahead.
Hail Eris. She's left out of a lot of this. A lot of this. Chaos apples have been very important to any esoteric tradition. Everybody who does any of this stuff knows that chaos apples it's how you communicate to another chaos magician that you're here to do this satirical poetry at a Dionysian festival, but you're doing it in space, right? You're doing it in the abstract. You're not doing it for the stage. You're trying to outdo the other satirists before you. There was this satirist before us who took his audience to the moon. His name was Lucian. He writes about the purple, and he puts in the mouth of Diogenes in one of his dialogues that anybody who's using the purple for food is doing it wrong.
Okay.
Right? What he's indicating there, because he's a cynic, from the get, the audience would have understand, A, he doesn't care about the dye as this symbol of royalty, right? He's a citizen of the world, right? A worshiper of Hecate. He doesn't care about the politics of the crossroad as long as you leave your offering, right? That's what the Hecatean tradition was really trying to get at. If you don't leave your offering, you got hell to pay.
Sure.
Right. And it adds up. You know what I mean? As you know, that's it. Am I being clear here?
Yep.
So anyway, in the mouth of Diogenes, Lucian of Samosata says that anybody who's using the purple for food is doing it wrong, right? That should indicate something to anybody who goes, all right, like Lucian cares about the poor and all that stuff. So he's not talking about the food aspect. What else is he talking about? You know, he's not talking about the dye, because that's, you know, materialistic bullshit. The food, you know, he's not talking about it in that material way where it's something to eat. He's talking about the entheogenic way that you can interact with this stuff. And that's a thing that people who were poor and people who were slaves would have known, because they're the ones interacting with it. They're the ones whose fingers are being stained purple, right? Those are slaves, not people who are doing that voluntarily, right? That's so important to stress. And Lucian really kind of says that through the mouth of Diogenes.
You got to be careful. You can't just drop Eris. You gotta always have Eris with Eros, right? Because you're throwing out also one of the absolute keys of all of Greek philosophy. Okay, the most important of the Greek pre-Socratic philosophers is Empedocles. And his essential idea, which informs all of Greek thought going forward and never gets challenged, is that the universe is based upon the iteration of love and strife. And that it's this combination, and that these are polar images, this idea, the invocation of the pole, right? And you see this everywhere. Apollo and Dionysus are only poles because it's reflecting that same polar imagery of Eros and Eros. It all comes back down to love and strife, and it is that drives the universe through creation. You need that strife, because that strife, that liberating force, causes us to evolve. It causes things to die and break down, and then causes us to, in response, pursue that Apollonian refinement. That Apollonian refinement only can exist when we are confronted with strife. You know, we see this in the magical tradition so often in allegory and mythology. Perfect example of this is the magician Christine de Pizan, one of Ammon's all-time favorites. In the book of The City of Ladies, she talks about how she was the first professional woman writer in Europe. And in order to become so, she went through hell and back. What happened to her was she was in the court of King Louis, but she's a woman. And at the time, her husband was a stenographer for the court and was pretty wealthy, but he dies of the plague. And this sets her whole world up on upend. And it takes her about 5 years of fighting, but she describes how she becomes, in her words, a man. She fully becomes a man in every sense, because she had to go to court to fight for her inheritance, to protect her children and her mother. Then after she wins that fight, she goes back to court. She becomes the royal vizier. She becomes the right-hand person to Queen Isabeau. And at this time, King Louis was mentally ill. You know, this is the year of the 100 Years' War, where there's the Duke of Orleans and the Duke of Aquitaine, who are constantly fighting over the throne. But the real power is Isabeau, behind the scenes, being advised by Christine de Pizan. And that woman, she rose to the occasion. She met the strife and was transformed by it. And she describes this, you know, by rising to the occasion, by facing the experience, she went through that alchemical wedding and became androgenized, embodied that power of masculinity, and then became a writer and defended women, wrote the first feminist book, defended women from a feminist perspective, you know, in the freaking early Renaissance. But it's a result of meeting the occasion, of facing strife. It's not just that Apollonian power. You got to rise to the occasion and evolve, you know?
I think, to me, it's all just drugs, man. That female and male power, and they're mixing them together, and that's why you have 60 plus ingredient lists in some of these potions. It's like they're putting their fingerprint on it.
It is, but you also have to think about it from a philosophical and a humanistic lens in terms of gender.
I think they wrote it into that. Yes, they turned it into that. It's like the three
Well,
idiots in the Bible that got burned and God came and saved them. They talked about that, and then in Isaiah 6:6, they're literally pulling a burning coal out of the fire, and that's what he anoints Isaiah with, and he's imparting that wisdom on him that he's getting from that experience.
Yeah, but when we go back to like some of the earliest of Greek myths, especially like to the creation myths of man, they exist as a bigendered being that is then split. This is a constant image throughout the tradition, whether it is the first man created by Prometheus that's split in half, or whether it's the divine androgyne Phanes or Thesis in the Orphic tradition, or Pythagoras. It's always this bigendered being that gets ripped apart. And the Greeks had a third gender, you know, that's been lost to us in the modern time. So I do agree, like the drugs are clear and the sex is clear. These are two elements, but there's a gender element that we have been ashamed of and lost, because what happens, what we later get in the Greek tradition, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but there's a clear, and I get this all from Ruck, and you can attest for this, but there's a clear patriarchalization that happens of the Greek tradition, When we go to the earliest iterations of these myths, Medusa is not a monster, Medea is not a monster, Artemis isn't a monster, Hecate's not. They're all these powerful goddesses. Where it really hit home to me is when you look at Hera. Hera used to stand alone and have no husband in the earliest traditions. She was the queen of the universe of cosmic order on her own. She is made subservient to Zeus and forcibly regulated over time. There's also the Dioscorides, the Gemini, the twins. The earliest iteration of the Gemini, they're actually called Opus and Argi, and they're two Amazonian women. In the later myth, what ends up happening is Castor and Pollux abduct these twins and make them their sex slaves, their women. And what's wild is Ruck in his book on Samothrace, he goes to this place where they had all these rites to Opus and Argi, and he shows how in the first cave that they excavate, it's only to the Dioscoridae, and there's no reference. And they almost didn't realize there was another cave, but as they were exploring, they realized the Greeks had buried an even earlier cave. And once they dig up the earlier cave, they find all the woman stuff buried in the earlier cave. And it's been totally disconnected and forgotten. There's this clear vilification of the feminine that happens, this satire. One of the elements that I'm so interested is the satire, because there's the clear degradation and vilification that happens where all of these powerful feminine images are transformed into tyrants. The literal word tyrant in Latin comes from the Etruscan goddess Turana, who is basically Hera. The English word despot comes from the Greek word despoina, which is another tyrant goddess. It's an iteration of Hera. So there's this whole weird thing where we're vilifying the feminine. In my mind, it becomes worse and worse over time. Like with Orpheus, it's very clear, and Ammon will talk about this. Part of the whole thing with Eurydice dying and going to the underworld is that when Orpheus goes to try and get her back, he spurns her. And a lot of people miss this, but it's the implication. Hades tells him you must trust her to follow you. And he doesn't. He doesn't believe in her. He doubts her. He turns his back on her, right? And then condemns her to separation. And then what happens? This is clearly documented in many sources, and no one likes to talk about it, but he gives up the love of women for the love of young men, boys. They use this word, neoniskos, right? And then he engages in rites with the boys, and then what happens? The Maenads kill him. The other people who follow the Dionysian rites, the women, they rip him apart and eat his flesh. Then they take his head and they throw it into the ocean, where it falls down river and winds up at the island of Sappho, and becomes an oracle. It becomes the seat of oracular tradition. But like, there's this fight that's going on in the Greek world between the feminine and the masculine, and the masculine is winning, and it's all the way up into the Christian tradition. In my mind, I look at Christianity as the ultimate patriarchal and monistic iteration of this system. It's now destroyed the other in the generation and enslaved the feminine, and totally flipped the poles and united everything into one single masculine image. And this is why, like, Ammon is here doing the satire. She's trying to destroy that patriarchal image in order to castrate it and turn it feminine again.
There you go.
As we've seen this in the myths. One of the things that people miss is that Saturn castrates Uranus, and then what happens? Uranus becomes Aphrodite. So when we castrate Zeus, he's going to turn again into the feminine, become Athena. You know, it's like, it's all of these cycles of transformation. Crowley talks about this too, how in the ancient past, we're in a matriarchal line. And then that matriarchy becomes tyrannical because it refuses to embrace change, refuses to embrace silence. And so the masculine has to overthrow the feminine. But now the masculine has overthrown the feminine, and we've gone too much now into that creative Apollonian. We're now going to destroy our world. We've turned Saturnian again. And now that patriarchal absolutism has to be destroyed. And this is why Crowley talks about the the coming age of the child, Harpocrates, the rebirth of the divine androgyne, where we unite these two modes again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the way that Skobie and I have been able to do this hyperstition ritual, where we're receiving this transmission from Mars in post 3030 from Arcturus and Sentinel Vega. We explain that they previously tried to send it back, but kind of failed. They sent it 1% too far, according to the Gregorian calendar, and that's
Saturn is your mama.
it turns
Look up
out,
Tirana.
yeah, right. It turns out that what they ended up sending us is the Voynich manuscript, which is a very powerful feminist document that explains how to overcome a patriarchal society. And deal with your excess male problem. That's very, very important. That's what all of the pipes and all of those things are about, is how to navigate that. You need ears to hear, knowing that you're going to the underworld. You need a nose to smell, right? Those things are very, very, very important. It's in the Hecatean tradition. And if you can get 3 noses to smell, you can navigate 3 pipes all at once. So Arcturus apologizes for sending it a little too far back in the past, but would like to let you know that it's available for everybody to navigate. And anybody who contributes to the Chorus of Frogs knows that they are simultaneously contributing to the Towel of Minerva, or the Towel of Minerva. They are simultaneously contributing to the Voynich manuscript to help decipher it, right? So any contribution to the Chorus of Frogs and the Towel of Minerva helps a person with an astute nose navigate one of the pipes in the Voynich manuscript. So if you would like to contribute, as a lot of people that are actually in the chat and everything have done, we have a thing. Look at us being producers and producing a show. We're so good at this, Johnny. Pat yourself on the goddamn. These are the deadlines. This is the website, or the email address which you should submit art to, or most people who know me personally can just send it to me. But if you're just a person who wants to contribute to this thing, knowing that they're contributing to the Voynich manuscript, which is a very powerful document to help navigate how to overcome patriarchy and achieve a matriarchal society. We explain that the problem is to send the excess males to Mars, and let them terraform Mars, and then let the women take care of things on Earth. One of the things that is very important to understanding this is that the selection process for what is a excess male is very different when you're in a matriarchal society versus a patriarchal society. So, there's going to be a transition period for a while. And one of the interesting things about this debate of the penises of Cerberus is that we're satirizing the internalized patriarchal nature of people who don't immediately recognize that Hecate is Cerberus, so Cerberus is a female dog, right? The trick,
Donuts.
right? The red herring is, let's get you to start making funny jokes about Cerberus's penis, right? But those with ears to hear know there's actually a lot of deeper meaning, and can see how we're filling the shoes and standing on the shoulders of Lucian, who took his audience to the moon. We're then building the bridge from the moon to Mars, and we're doing it using hyperstition and doing it in the future. And it's very fun chaos magic, and it has proven to be real in a lot of actual situations. We did a live signing at the beginning of the show for somebody who bought it from my brother's store, because you can get it signed by us, which was very, very fun, and we really appreciate that sort of thing. And because we have Snappy with us, you can use promo code Snappy to make a 10% to get 10% off, and make a contribution to the Temple of the Muses, which is very fun. So some of the proceeds for that go to that. If you want to buy the book and all of that stuff. I didn't mean to cut it off and have a plug. I just noticed that we actually have some people watching, which is fun. So anyway, does anybody have anything to say? Do you want to unmute their mics and
They muted themselves.
Okay, cool.
I didn't know you could do that. It's fucking cool. I don't have to control it.
I thought he was the one that did it. I thought he was being a jerk.
No, I tried to
We were-
unmute Tiger Shark earlier, and I was like, and it said,
Here's the
"Oh
thing
no,
that I
Tiger
love.
Shark muted himself."
I thought Johnny was
Sorry,
being
dude.
Apollonian, but you guys,
No, thanks.
you were just being polite and professional. You go, I'm gonna mute. He's doing a diatribe, and then you unmute immediately. You're so professional and good at this. Do you have any thoughts? Well, on how we're trying to connect the future and connect Mars with the underground on Earth and explore how the Martian underground would happen and all of that. So we're doing a lot of performance art, and like anywhere that you see yourself being inspired by any of this stuff, you can submit something and be a member of the Chorus of the Frogs. So anyway, Tiger Shark, has this inspired you to do anything about this Zeus's alabastrum, the lightning alabastrum that you stumbled upon, and you said you had in your hand, and you said you described the way that it feels like a man's penis, and you know I just feel like you had very
I think
things
you're
about
projecting here. I don't he said
projecting a penis on the wall
No, I
of the
think you're
cave.
projecting
Johnny,
your own.
yes, that's the point. We're projecting in our audience's mind, their mind cave, the thought of Tiger Shark holding one of these naturally occurring alabastrums. That was a lightning bolt, Zeus's alabastrum. He had it in his hand. He felt
That's
it
Zeus's
throb.
alabastrum.
He felt it throb because he was on a Asterion at the time, and it throbbed in his hand. He was just going to describe all of that for us. But thank you for helping paint that picture on the mind cave of our audience.
You're welcome.
Anyway, Tiger Shark, tell us about these massive throbbing penis-shaped alabastrums that you found that were from lightning bolts.
He said
This
he
is
found
fascinating.
one. He said he found one.
I found a big one. It was a what we call cloud to ground lightning strike, which accounts for like 20% of all lightning that you see. The rest of it just kind of stays up there as thunder.
Right.
Doesn't really come down.
Yep.
But I traded it. I traded it for a meteorite, actually.
Okay.
That's so wild to me. Because are you familiar with in the Indian tradition? There's this idea of the lingam. So specifically within the Shaivite iterations of Hinduism, there's this understanding of the divine symbol of the unity of God and goddess is what's called the lingam, and it's a stone phallus that's then sat inside of a stone receptacle that's called a yoni. It's supposed to be the penis and the vagina kind of creating a pedestal. But one of the big things they look for are called Jyotri linga, or naturally occurring linga. And so they'll worship these lightning strikes that you're talking about as iterations of the penis of God descending to earth, showing that fire, because they talk about Shiva is the pillar of fire in the heart of creation, in the womb, in the hearth, right? He's the flame in the hearth, and the great mother is the hearth. So yeah, you're on to something there. You still see that to this day in modern traditions that are related. You know, Shaivism is deeply connected to Hellenism and vice versa. So
that's awesome. No, I and then the other thing I was thinking about, Mandy, when you're talking about Mars is I love it, man. I love people having ideas and kind of like what the future is going to be, right? We use the past to understand the present and the future, and I think that's where we should be. I mean, I think too many people live in the now, the present, right? And I think we need to think of it in a time space, like the past influences now and the future influences now as well. So us being in that mindset and holistically thinking about everything, like Leibniz talks about. I know Leibniz is another Christian philosopher, but I liked his physics actually, because he was against guys like Newton, and he said we can't understand the universe until we start thinking holistically, and I think that's 1,000% true. So
well, they kind of call it like cosmopolitan, like to be a world liver, but like what do you call it if you're a liver of the universe? You know what I mean? Like,
ooh, world liver, like the filter of alcohol. Like, no, you just stepped in some Dionysian Bacchic
whatever
shit.
you want.
The world liver, like the liver of the world, the cosmic liver. Ooh, that's great, Johnny.
You're welcome.
Oh, I love that. Dude, can you write about the cosmic liver? Like
Sure.
you're depending on what you
Are
put
you-
into it. If it's wine or beer,
Ooh,
it
man.
filters out the cosmic liver.
I've had a lot of cosmic liver.
Oh,
Have
I
you,
love
have any
that.
of you guys dug into, in terms of philosophy, Germanic paganism, or like Ludwig Klages, or any of those turn of the century Germanic pagan
That's this
philosophers?
guy.
Well, Klages is a really interesting guy. He's kind of received modern kind of boost because a lot of modern pagans really like him. They started republishing his stuff, and some modern right wingers like him. He's a very controversial, interesting thinker. But one of the things that he talks about that is interesting to this hyperstition from a pagan perspective is that in the Germanic pagan mind, only the past is real. The present is unfolding, and the future is not happened yet. So there's this thing about we can only understand and relate things to the past. So that power of the necromancy, of the invocation of the spirits and the ideas of the past, it's the only way to project into the future. And so that hyperstition kind of lends itself to this type of paganistic thinking, in which the past is real. If you could project something into the past, then of course you could flip the future. It also makes sense from that polar magic sense that we see in the Greek Roman tradition with the love and the strife, because just how, in that tradition, there's this understanding, like look at the goddess Estrella. Estrella is Virgo. She's the one who ascends to the stars through her own means. How does she do it? She goes to the underworld. Psyche goes to the underworld. It's kind of, you have to invoke the pole. You have to go inwards into yourself, into the depths of the abyss before you can ascend to the stars. In order to create the future, you have to go to the past. You have to see what happened in the past and imagine it in the future. These things are cyclical, right?
So Snappy, I love that the muse just delivered that, because Raw Path here had a question. It says, in the book, are we navigating an innavigatable timeline? And one of the things that I love, because I know this person is also a fan of Robert Anton Wilson, is that our book is very much inspired by reading of Finnegan's Wake.
Yes.
And one of the things that I when I tried to introduce my brother to Robert Anton Wilson was to say, like, you can do his form of bibliomancy, where take Finnegan's Wake and open it to a random page and read it and get something out of it. And the first time we did it, we found the words whistle pig, which is some of the best whiskey of all time. And he poured whistle pig when he found it. It was like, I'm drinking whistle pig. And Robert Anton Wilson's bibliomancy just delivered whistle pig in Finnegan's Wake. Like, what else is here? And I go check out page 4, because he says Brecca Keket coax coax.
Right.
And then I go take a look at what who's the guy who did the skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake? It was Campbell.
Yes, Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, he's the one who does the hero's journey and stuff. Yep. What he wrote before that was the skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake. And he doesn't get into any depth about, even as close as page 4, where an explicit reference to Aristophanes' frogs. Like, this is such a great opportunity.
But he just mentions it in the page and then leaves it alone. He doesn't say what it means at all.
Yeah, and the point
of the strangest thing.
The point of that book is to go line by line by line of Finnegan's Wake and explain how it separates and navigates and goes this way and that way and that way and that way. So if you're a fan of Robert Anton Wilson, take a look at what he has to say about Finnegan's Wake. Understand that what he has to say about Finnegan's Wake, with all of these ways that it navigates, and that we're doing a very feminist and forward version of it, and saying, do that with the Voyage manuscript, and take all that inspiration and navigate it that way, because it is entirely innavigatable. Finnegan's Wake starts where it ends. There's no actual line or anything.
Yeah, and they actually talk about it. The wife of the main character, she's like talking about how she goes into the river, and then all this. It's a big circle, because it starts and ends with the same kind of poem. It's so strange. The weirdest fucking book. Yeah. It rhymes in a way. Yeah.
It rhymes, and it's showing you how the cycles unfold. It's not that the universe is a circle. The universe is a spiral.
Right.
And things tend to rhyme. and experiences repeat in parallel to each other. It's like, it's like what we're seeing right now in our modern politics. Trump is not what we saw in World War II, but he's also what we saw in World War II. It's the same but different. It's the same kind of iteration of the same problem, but in a new scope, because we didn't solve the root issues. And this is how the universe works. These problems will continue to come up again and again through the rhyme until they become resolved. You see it in your own life. It's how the muse works. It's the dance of love and strife. And the clear problem is that we're constantly going to the same idea where we want to invest in a single man, the entirety of authority. You want to build up all of our society to be one single ginormous entity that controls everything. This is bound to always lead to stagnation and fall apart. It reminds me, I'm a huge science fiction nerd, and my big breakthrough into Hellenism was reading Dune by Frank Herbert and reading Foundation by Asimov. And people, when I tell them that, they go, what do you mean? What does this have to do with Hellenism? Both of these people are classicists who studied the Greek and are telling you flat out that they're approaching it from a Greek philosophical angle and that they are writing to each other. Okay, they're writing to each other, and people miss this. At the end of Asimov's Foundation series, he unites both robots and Foundation. He has the robot Danil Olivav. He brings all of humanity together to create, and all of life, all matter in the entire known universe becomes one single living being, Galaxia. This is a Greek word. The Galaxia was the festival that they would have in the Temple of the Muses. And here's the key thing. At the Galaxia, everyone would come and sit on the floor as equals and would eat the same food. Right? So everyone living equality as one single being. That was Asimov's vision. And he got this from Plato. And so at the end of his series, he has everything go to that Apollonian height, become Galaxia. Now, Frank Herbert sees this. He's also a classicist. He is fucking appalled. He says this has missed the entire point, right? What happens every time you create Galaxia or every time you invest power into this kind of thing? It gets ripped apart in Dionysian frenzy. Because that ultimately leads to stagnation and death. It'll lead to the ultimate end of life. It resists generation in the natural way and order of the universe, right? It doesn't understand the fundamental concept that change is the only thing that is real. And even when you create these ultimate forms of structure, if they cannot adapt, they will become stagnant and consume themselves. And that is also the message we're supposed to learn from the Saturnian tyrant.
And what was
those tyrannies?
What was
that force of control?
That message from Diogenes where he said you can't wash your vegetables in the same river twice.
Right.
It's very, very important. And the same guy that said that when you're down there in the other world, it stinks. And you can navigate by smell.
Well, I just love it, right? Well, Diogenes also, he meets the most powerful man in the entire fucking world, a literal god man to his people, Alexander the Great. And Alexander says, Diogenes, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? He says, please step out of my son and leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me the fuck alone. Right, yeah. He says that, yeah.
Can you quit blocking the side? Go the fuck away.
Yeah. That was one of Mandy's initiations to me, was showing me that video of it was like a character sketch of get out of my fucking son, he says, kind of thing. And
behold Plato's human with the chicken, the plucked
chicken. My favorite. He goes, when you walk into a rich man's home, there is nowhere to spit but his face.
Jesus Christ.
Now, whatever that man's on, I want some.
Does anybody know what decades question? I don't know what that means. Richard
Tynas? I'm not familiar with that author.
Neither am I.
But yeah. What I was trying to get at, though, is that, there's this play between these things. That Apollonian ideal is beautiful because it leads to refinement. It leads to incredible beauty. It leads but it also produces stagnation and destruction. And we have to acknowledge that. Another thing, we've talked about this, Lucian brings up, what leads to destruction? the Greeks' love of sweet food. And what does he mean by this? It was the silk trade and that desire for expanded cuisine that led to imperialism, that led to Alexander the Great, that caused all the fucking war, that the heights of Apollonialism manifested slavery and degradation, right? And we have to acknowledge this. You know, that classical world that I like in the Renaissance could only exist at the expense of the outside world, you know? And that, just like in modern America, we see this time and time again. That Apollonian height always comes at an expense. And that Dionysian liberation has to come and upset that status quo, you know? Eventually, that pursuit of the height can turn into corruption. And it, you know, I always think too about decadence. Have any of you guys read Ibn Khaldun? So Ibn Khaldun is an Arabic philosopher called the godfather of history, basically. And he kind of came up with the first modern understanding of a historical perspective. And one of the things that he talks about is the role of decadence. And he saw in his time, the truth was that the cities were weak. While the cities produced the heights of science and culture and desire, they were fundamentally vulnerable to the outside world, vulnerable to the power of the tribes. So what he recognized was that there was this cyclical change that would consistently happen, where you would have a power from the tribe would overthrow the city, bring in this Dionysian revelry into the city, reestablish equality. But then that what once established equality now becomes the new authority. And over time, that liberating force turns decadent. And now that decadence requires the same thing from the outside to come and upset it. And the same cycle would happen. Where Ibn Khaldun says that things started to change is with the rise of Islam. All of a sudden, the power is shifted to the cities. And no longer is the, you know, what he was recognizing is this massive shift in history where the outside forces could no longer upset the power of the science and nobility. And he said that this was going to lead to insane amounts of tyranny. And that's literally been so much of our modern world, you know?
Yeah. Well, Snappy, that reminds me of the fourth turning, or like it's like a cyclical nature of human society. It's like on an 80-year kind of continuum where like every 80 years these kind of themes come back and they kind of re-interact, and you know. Well,
in the Greek tradition, you know, they used to talk about how you would have 4 years of Dionysus and then 4 years of Apollo and then 2 years of Dionysus. Sometimes it's 40 and 20. Not sure how the cycles would play out. For a while, the Pythia would be talking to Dionysus, and then for a while, the Pythia would be talking to Apollo. Dionysus is that liberating force that brings that destruction, right? And, you know, you can feel it in our modern age. We're entering into that polar extreme again. As soon as things start to get too stagnant, as soon as things get decadent, you know, and this is the thing. The decadence always revels in its decadence, and it disconnects itself from life. It stops loving the world. It starts judging the world. It starts trying to assert its will upon everything. And this is always going to lead to violence of the utmost kind. And the question is always, does Nemesis come and upset that power, or does she come and upset all of human life? Because this is where I find myself, where these cycles keep repeating again and again, and it's going to get to the point where it's like, can the Earth survive this, or are we going to be destroyed and something replace us? Well, so that's a fundamental question, I think. Either humanity needs to evolve beyond this Apollonian greed, or I should say Saturnian greed, we are doomed. We are fucking doomed. If we cannot break out of this pattern of decadence and hatred of the Earth, we are fucking doomed.
Well, and so that's the thing. I love that you said the Earth, because Gaia. Yeah. You build all of your Apollonian all of your buildings on
the back of Gaia.
On the back of Gaia, you fucking idiots. Yes. She will shake you off because she queefed. She doesn't care, right? What she cares about is that massive linguistic penis. All right. Like, how well do you dance around the pole and drive that pole into her? the better you drive that pole into her, the more fertile she will make your fields. She doesn't care about your buildings.
Talking about
Right?
the maypole?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
She wants the big phallus. Why do
She
you
wants-
worship the goddess on the mountain? Because she needs a big penis.
Yes.
It's just how it is. She wants to, you want to, if you look at the early satire before it was explicit, they're literally during rites of cunnilingus to make the earth come, so that when you make the earth come, then the crops will grow, right? The Egyptians, they're taking the mountain to the river, because now you don't have to go to the mountain to worship the goddess. You get her by the river. You combine all of this.
Shit.
And it's also capitalism now. Now you have a tourist spot. Everyone comes, right? And
Is
everyone
that- is
feels
that-
in such a trade.
Isn't that a Dire Straits song? Like Mountain to the River?
Yeah. But this is also a constant theme that you see with religions, is that, you know, they get established around places of trade or places of water, you know, and those places are usually are holy because people all need to go there in order to work. And what happens is that's the place where you can influence people. So you set up a temple and you try to influence culture and create mythos in order to weaponize politics. Like, so much of religion is just fucking politics. All mythology is just politics. And this is something that a lot of people, it is about refining the self and psychology, but more than that, it's politics. And it's especially so in like the Bible. The Bible is nothing more than trying to vilify and control the other, to use your own mythology to justify your own supremacy and to steal land.
Yeah, I have a comment. You're talking about the cycle. For me, I think about it from this perspective. Life is sculpted from the hand of death. And you also talked about refinement, so there's a sculpting part of it. But when I think of Ouroboros, like Mandy was talking about, I think of it from a cosmological standpoint. Have you guys ever seen, so there's a paper out there where they have a video through the observations of black holes, where there's a star that's getting sucked around the event horizon, and
Yeah.
it looks like an Ouroboros.
Yeah, I
Just
saw this yesterday
eating
on
its own tail.
Twitter, or the other day on Twitter. Yeah.
And then you have another galaxy. It's the Horseshoe Galaxy. Actually, it's
Yep.
a black hole causing that to happen. So that cycle is just in us. And then the other aspect is like there's increasing complexity, right, with evolution. So the increasing complexity, is that something that we should adhere to? Is that something we want, or is that something we should not want? Because it seems to be a universal underpinning of growing complexity, not only in biological life, but in the ordering and structure of the actual universe itself.
So this is a really interesting point, because philosophically, this is a deep struggle within the Greco-Roman tradition. You know, Plato talks about this, so does Anaxagoras, but they get to this idea about how, okay, what is ionic life? What is the purpose of this life? And what's funny is I think like there's a modern TV show that really greatly explains the Greek understanding, and that is Westworld, first season. Because in the Greek conception, at least according to the philosophers, you go through these experiences to evolve, to refine intelligence. And the idea is that within this universe, we exist within a framework in which there is time and death and change. And so that allows for evolution in the creation of an intelligence. It can only exist when you have that strife that allows for refinement. But then there comes a point when you have to break free out of this bind, out of the binds of time. And then you can exist beyond and outside of time. But the idea is once you get to that outside of time, you've now become a mature adult, and you're not just going to rape the person next to you, you know. And this is, and I use that specific theme because that's a theme that comes up constantly in the Greek myths. The hero gets to the muse, and what does he do when he sees the object of beauty? He tries to possess it. And as soon as you try to possess it, it's taken from you because you're not fucking mature enough. You know, you're not good enough. And that's, you know, now that's one philosophical understanding to a very complex idea, but it's something I feel deeply. You know, I believe honestly that this universe is about creating intelligence and evolving to refine us to a point where we can then move beyond this embryonic phase and into a greater cycle. At least I like to think so.
Have you ever heard of Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance theory?
I've heard it, but it's not something I'm like deeply familiar with.
So there's another guy, a microbiologist, Dr. Levine. He's doing a phenomenal work with organisms, but basically the consensus is that, I don't know, if I ask a layman, like, hey, if I cut off this lizard and the lizard has the ability to regrow its arm, what tells the lizard to, like, how to know how to grow that arm to the same size that it was before, not to some goofy size? And a lot of people just say, well, it's got to be in the DNA code, right? It's got to be some genetic sequence, right, to tell it. Nope, doesn't exist in your genetic sequence at all. And they go, well, how does this apply to humans? Because actually, in your embryonic stage, obviously, you have the ability to do that, right? So their answering is that there's this outside causal force that interacts with your consciences that actually tells it to take shapes. And this gets back to Plato, even with the forms.
Right.
And people are
And
like,
this
what the fuck are
also
you talking
in the
about? And he himself said,
Yeah.
not a lot of people are going to know what I'm saying, but that's basically what it is. It's an ever increasing complexity of structure from not only biological life, but also what these guys like Levine and Sheldrake are saying is consciousness. There's
so
an evolution
beautiful.
of consciousness. It's not just stagnant.
No, exactly. I fundamentally agree with this. You know, we see this in the mythopoetic tradition of the Muses. They talk about the great mother and the hand of the great mother and the personal muse. Okay, so there's this understanding that source. So think about it. Also makes me think just in terms of basic science. Okay, we all return to source. Life goes through its current and then returns back to source. So that's what we're going to do. And what guides you through that evolutionary cycle to return back to source is source itself. And what is that? It's the muse. It's that voice in your head that guides you through form. It's literally what you're talking about, that externalized thing that exists beyond the event horizon of the black hole. What is the black hole? It's the chaos gap. It's the womb of the great mother, right? So yeah, we're getting into
can I say one more thing that we do, and part of the depth of the satire that both of you just stepped into in our book is that we say language cannot capture this, right? It is in you cannot capture what it is you're truly talking about, this experience of this. Language cannot capture it. Needs to be experienced, right? That's why we tie it to aroma so much, because when it comes to aroma, you if you've never smelled something before, you cannot actually you're only approximating it to your previous experiences, right? So if all of your previous experiences are patriarchal, you can't smell what a matriarchal society would smell like, right? So you're in these very abstract spaces that, you know, the two of you just sort of stepped into. So I'm trying to be Hecatean with the sort of some of the things that you both pooped out, because it was absolutely brilliant. There's wonderful little nuggets in those poop, and as Cerberessians, as the doggos, we sort of go in there and smell those little nuggets that the diatribes delivered. And I would love for somebody to sort of take what just happened and be inspired from that to contribute something to the book, because that's like what the book's like really does is inspire these kinds of conversations. And I know I'm breaking up the conversation to point out how conversations can inspire art, but if you're the type of person who is inspired by this, like really like do something with it. Get a piece of paper and jot something down and send us those words you just jot down. We'll put them in the book. You know, that's like what the point of the book and the point of these conversations is just to drive it a little bit home.
Have any of you engaged magic, tried magic, as silly as that sounds?
Magic the Gathering?
No, like ritual occult magic.
I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
I think that depends on what your definition of magic is.
Yeah, I get okay. Well, I take a very general, loose definition of magic, but I mean it in a very willful understanding because, like, for example, okay, my muse is the goddess Hestia or Tacita or Acalorent, many names, but there's a specific goddess that I have connected to that was deeply inspiring to me, and then I found through this tradition and through looking and discovering the muse. And there's a way in which you can engage this, and you can literally find the hand that will guide you. And what in the Greek tradition is called learning to sit in the silence. If you invoke that pole, if you are able to meditate in the deep silence and you are able to move beyond, so when you first start to listen to your mind, you believe that your mind is you, that voice that's talking, the chatter is just you. But if as you learn to sit in the silence, what happens is you become disconnected from the chatter, and the chatter keeps going and it's no longer conscious of you. And then eventually the chatter stops and you're sitting in the silence. But then again, if you keep engaging, a new chatter will begin of a different kind than the one before. And it's not a spoken chatter. It's an intuitive feeling. It's beyond speech. It doesn't appear like the voice in your head, but it is a voice. And that is that feeling. That is that magic of the Great Mother. I don't know how else to describe it. It's that spark of the muse. And when you can get to that imagery, when you can connect to that, wild things start to happen. Synchronicities will start to happen in your life. Things will start to unfold in a way that's only for you. But if you are open to that magical perspective, you will be taken on a wild journey of self-discovery and understanding. You know, put this in perspective. Before I met Mandy about 2.5 years ago, I was an entirely different person. And I felt almost absolutely broken. You know, I hated myself. I was in a very deep depression and I was almost unwilling to get out of bed. But through a series of magical events that happened because of a ritual that I did for this muse, all of a sudden, I'm now this person and I love myself. I'm comfortable where I'm at. I have a loving partner. I found my fucking purpose. My everything has taken an entire 360-degree flip overnight, just from a willingness to engage and listen, you know? And so, I mean, I'm a mystic. Take it at a grain of salt. Try it for yourself and see what the fuck happens. But you know, I couldn't be happier with life.
Well,
and 2
so
years ago, I was not.
that's one of the things about the Hecatian life tradition that I think is lost on a lot of people, is that it's actually life affirming, right? Because it makes you look at death differently when you come out the other end, right? And you end up being covered in something that smells bad. The thing about being covered in something that smells bad is that it makes you appreciate the good smells.
Well, you know, anyone. It's like anyone who's done any of the. I always, if you got to know your body, you got to know yourself. I don't recommend anyone take anything, but at the same time, anytime you take shrooms, you go through that purgation, okay? And there's a moment, if you do a hero's journey and you get sick and you look at the vomit becomes beautiful. And there's not a single person that I've talked to that's had a mushroom trip that doesn't tell you this. They're literally looking in their own filth and it's beautiful, man. And it sounds like hippie bullshit, but it's not when you experience it. It's
so those who tuned in from the very beginning will understand the metaphor that I built at the beginning about communing with Dr. James Hillman in a Hecatian tradition. The joke is that I'm lactose intolerant, so I do mushrooms and eat a grilled cheese sandwich and induce that
purgation.
Or the purgation. Yes, and then read the results like the tea leaves, and that is how I communed today with Dr. James Hillman, the Jungian psychologist. the infathomable, the infallible, the true infallible Hillman, Dr. James Hillman, because he answered the Cerberus-ian question correctly and authentically in this communion.
That's
And
wild.
it was an entheogenic communion. And Diogenes, Lucian, and Menippus are watching right now with him, eating popcorn in the underworld. And Cerberus is joined. It's a whole crew down there watching us do this catabasis ritual that we have taken our audience through. Where the first third was a little chaotic. The center third felt a little good. And what we're on now is the dessert course. Right? I wanted to go for 3 hours. We're at 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That was why I was doing this. So we're deep in the dessert course, and I really, really, really want to give the audience something in this last half hour that's nice and juicy and sweet and flavor in their mouth, and they're left inspired to write to buy the book and to write something. And I also would like to say, I know I'm breaking it up. I'm doing the chorus of frog, brekka coax thing. I would like to thank Raw for purchasing the book, personalized copy of volume 1 of book 2 on our website, and that gets you a personalized signed copy. I know it sounds corny, but we always use the same personalized copy, and it goes like this. It says Raw, R-A-W. I wonder what that stands for.
We could. What do you think?
We'll leave that one for those with ears to hear.
Raw's War, right?
Oh,
Wrestling?
It took you to professional wrestling?
Yeah,
Not
wrestling,
Robert
yeah.
Anton Wilson?
Yeah. Oh,
Not that at all.
no.
That's where you got.
I
That's
was
where you
going
went.
Raw's
With
War.
you went professional wrestling instead of Robert Anton Wilson this whole time. We're 2.5 hours in.
I thought they wanted to stone cold stunner me. No.
I'm gonna say that you're putting on a character right now, and it's lovely, and you're a Skobie Won, and you're communing with Bacchus right now, and I love it.
I did just have a chicken sandwich.
The cock crowed 3 times in your mouth.
3 times.
3 times in your mouth just now.
Spicy.
Skobie Won, ladies and gentlemen, for the last half an hour of the show. Everybody, this is very exciting. We're doing a personalized copy of the book here.
I turn into a pumpkin after 11 o'clock. I am exhausted.
Pumpkinification. There's a Greek word for that. We're
I
doing.
had to get up at the dawn. Fuck.
So we're
I got up at 6. I get up at 6:30 every day. So it's
the personalized says follow F. Your nose. And I do my little squiggly. You're Skobie Hancockus, which is funny because his DJ name is Johnny with an I, like Johnny Hancock. So, yes, that's
when you read a lot of these magical texts, it's kind of a wild thing is that they'll say that when you invoke a spirit, you will smell them, and if you truly are engaging, you'll smell them.
Yes.
I've had this experience. I've had this experience a couple times, like on some heavy stuff, DMT and whatnot, where I smelled the wildflowers before you see Aphrodite, and that's some wildness right there.
Snappy, before we step ankle deep into the dessert course here, I do want to say you can go to our website, Skobie Won, shopskobiewon.com, use promo code Snappy for 10% off. A portion of the proceeds go to the contribution for the Temple of the Muses. You can make a donation just by being a homie and, of course, with the frogs.
We are building a Temple to the Muses eventually, a not-for-profit, community temple to celebrate reason and rectitude and justice. Beauty.
And Tiger Shark, thank you for buying this hat, dude. Appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, I'll be supporting more too, so don't worry.
That's awesome. Really cool hat.
Yeah,
you guys have some really awesome t-shirts. I saw Grandpa Leather was designing them for you. I remember.
Yeah, we're doing some artist collaborations for shirts and stuff. So if you're not the type of person necessarily to contribute something using words for the book, you can contribute art for t-shirts.
I got one from the chat, and I will own up to it. So I will make a shirt.
Yeah. So we're always taking t-shirt design ideas. Anything that we make beyond the cost and stuff goes to Hip Hop to the Homeless, unless otherwise specified with one of the promo codes for another nonprofit that we donate to. I think you may be seeing a recurring theme here, but we donate to nonprofits because money is the root of all evil, and the love of money is the root of all evil. I do want to say one thing. You know, I was talking to a friend of ours that we all have in common, and he was describing. We were like, you know, I really want you to like give me something for the next book, and he said a word, and it was philo-LOLology, the love of the laughing logos.
Okay, repeat this.
Philo-LOLology.
Philo-LOL. Oh, wow.
So you take philology and you force an LOL in the middle there, and you turn it into a hilarious triad. It becomes the love of the laughing logos.
The love of laughing logos. Wow, that's a
Oh,
tongue twister even in of itself.
Exactly, and that's half the fun, right?
Oh,
So,
in the logos.
you know, the
To
better
take
you
it
get
down.
at the better you get at using that tongue, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, the logos is one of the most complicated and misunderstood. It is the word in a sense, but that is such a limited understanding, and it's been so bastardized by the Christian, right? It is fundamentally to reckon. It literally means to reckon, to take account, to reason. You're utilizing that faculty of mind. It's the act of perceiving, but not simply perceiving, but then analyzing it through your mental capacity. You know, it's the act. You know, and it's that magical act, right? Who is the one who is the manifestation of reason? Hermes. And who tells the myths? Who gives birth to language? Hermes. You know.
And you know, Hermes is the psychopomp, goes from the under to the over. You know.
Well, he's also the partner of Tacita, right? The muse. What happens with Hermes is he's forced to bring her to the underworld, and then together they give birth to the Genii and the Lares and the Daimones, the various intermediary spirits that make up everything. You know, it's another thing that a lot of people miss is that, you know, these traditions are fundamentally animistic, and you aren't even considered a full individual. You're a bunch of daimones, and you were looking at daimones. Everything is mediated by daimones, and if you do not know how to engage with these energies, then you're wandering in the world blind. You know, you are literally in the cave. You know, and our current society tells us not to communicate, not to try and have a conversation, to disregard it all, and to pretend it's not even there. But I'm getting all mystical on your asses. Sorry, guys.
That's what this dessert course is for. It's the mystical course. You know what calliope smells like, right? Raspberries and rum.
Raspberries.
Right, the universe.
Tiger Shark, does that mean anything to you? Raspberries and rum?
Raspberries and rum, yeah, probably a couple songs.
No, so raspberries and rum is the smell of the Milky Way, because the chemical, the actual little tiny little molecule, is in such abundance in the Milky Way that they were able to detect it using
Yeah, I think I heard of that.
Yeah. There's a technical term for it, and I'm sure somebody in the audience down there will
I was thinking a lot what you guys were just saying, but Snappy, I was going to go back to that experience you had with breaking out of the depression, right? You were talking about that. Mm-hmm. And the way I think about stuff like that is it's very interesting actually to think about, because it's not intuitive, at least I think for people like you know, you go to public school and you learn stuff like that, right? You learn that one arrow going in one direction, but I would call experiences like that, what I call it is a transversality of liminality. And liminality is the term that I'm pulling from anthropology. And by that, you're breaking these forms. You can think about like Plato's forms are changing shape, they're evolving, but the liminality is that experience to break that, right? So whatever is getting you out of that, that's pulling you in that direction to change that form, right? But going along with knowing that evolution is happening, you know, not just physically, in the material, but also consciously. That's just a normal step in the stone, right? So even though we experience these things as big impacts in parts of our life, I think they're just normal, right? And I would think that if somebody stayed in that depressive mode, it's actually being anti-nature. You're going against that flow, right? You're going against that cycle and the changing of that form, which is why I think a lot of people, that to me is what depression is. It's the expression of staying in this shape that you don't want to stay in. That life is a cycle and it's pulling you in that direction. It's the great attractor, if you will. But if you're just sitting in it, then I think that's just not normal, right?
Absolutely. And this is the thing, you know, so much of our modern people, you know, I think our two biggest degrading factors that hold us back are affluence, number one, and then number two is anxiety. And that anxiety is almost always born of affluence. You know, it's like we've had so much of the world given to us, you know, and then it becomes this. You see what happens when people are in extreme affluence. They want the universe to give them their will. They just want you know, and they'll do anything to force their will upon the universe. That is the fundamental wrong way to approach anything. You're never going to get very far like that. Even when you succeed, you fundamentally fail because you'll have to go through the cycle again, you know, and all you do is bounding yourself by greed, you know, but on the other flip side, the anxiety, you know, in my instance, you're so right. So much of my depression was a unwillingness to face myself, admit who I was, and to make the changes necessary to go forward in life. And I was just in that stagnant mode, and it took something to come and snap me out of it. And for me, it needed to be a reawakening along this kind of a spiritual lens, but that's how I've lived my life and I view my life. So it could be something radical for someone else. It doesn't have to be that, but you're right. It's a fundamental growth thing.
But that's where I see that that third, you were talking about third gender. That's what that is to me, because I think about it from a universal mindset. So think about a universe with one particle, literally only one particle, nothing happens, right? It's boring. Well, think of a universe with two particles, and there's two modes only. And all you can really tell maybe the distance between the two, or maybe if they're stuck together. But there's really not a lot of interactions, a lot of changes happening, right, with that type of a universe. The real fun, the real diversity starts to happen in a three-particle universe.
Absolutely. It's when you get that infinity of forms, and you get the diversity, and you get the interplay, and you get this exchange, you know. It's also, you know, this is really important when we're talking about like monism and stuff, because imagine the universe is one particle, right? How do you have any discussion of anything? If the universe is just the card, then the card's the card, and there is no knowledge itself can't even exist. So the one has to become many in order to know itself. In the Greek tradition, you have this image of the goddess in the mirror. And the mirror is creation. And she creates creation in order to recognize herself in the mirror. And it's that act of witnessing and perceiving the beautiful that is the unfolding of creation. And creating a multiplicity of forms and evolving is all about manifesting new experience, new iterations of beauty, new gain. This is why the Hindus, they call creation the Leela. It's literally the unfolding of the game, of us making love to ourselves in order to create an infinite diversity of forms to play with, you know? And it's beautiful. I think like the problem is when we get stuck and we resist change, when we become bound to our own limited understanding, when we don't recognize ourselves as witness. You know, this experience, this life is but a fucking moment. You are the infinite universe winking at itself. You know, like there will be a million different iterations. And the point is we must go through these experiences with as much joy as we can and try to learn and evolve beyond them. That's how I believe.
Yeah. There was the German guy named Fred that was a satirist. He wrote a bunch of books, you know, some of them about the Dionysian theater and all of that stuff.
You call him Fred now?
Are you talking about Friedrich Schiller?
Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. Oh, Fred. Anyway, he had a brilliant saying that I absolutely love, and I think it really captures, sort of what you're saying is that you need chaos in your heart to give birth to a dancing star.
Agreed.
It's the two of them. You need it
Mhm.
to be able to give birth to the dancing star.
When we were talking earlier about Asimov and Herbert, the fundamental issue is utopia. Utopia does not exist in nature. It cannot exist in nature. It's fundamentally opposed to nature, and yet we keep trying to create utopia. We keep trying to manifest this ideal, and it keeps exploding in our effing face because we have to embrace adaptation and change and growth. Any system that's a closed system is fundamentally going to stagnate.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's a deity or if it's a city. If it's if that's your ideal, it's bound to be limited.
Well, what do you know about the I Ching? You read into that, the I Ching at all?
I've done a little bit of the I Ching, but I'm not too familiar.
So what they think, and McKenna talks about it actually.
It's all about it's like quantum computing.
It's like time, but there's subtypes of time, subtimes, I guess you would say. And they did it. They got there in a different direction, but it's very interesting how it lines up with like 64 codons in your DNA, for example. But they're saying this about time, and like if you look at a sand dune, right? What is a sand dune? It's basically a lower subtype of time, right? Because if you look at the sand dune, it's made of sand, particular weight, whatever. You can actually back calculate the wind, pressure, temperature that created it over time. So it's like an imprint of it. And that same imprint is in us biologically, and it's called evolution, right? And so whatever created us is actually imprinted on us. And it's in that slice of time, and there's different times, but everybody thinks of time wrong. It's not sequential, it's concurrent. And you have to, if you actually understand that, you'll realize that everything is holistic. And you just said it. You can't just take a system like entropy. The second law of entropy is you cannot create nor destroy energy. But where did they do that test? They did it in a closed system. And apparently the universe is supposed to be infinity. So whatever results you have in a closed system and put it in infinity is not going to work.
Absolutely.
So those laws and things are now being challenged, obviously, with quantum mechanics, the Hubble tension, right, with the lambda CDM and things like that. But it's funny how it plays back into a lot of what we're talking about now, and how different cultures, the Greeks, the Chinese, and others already understood this. And they all went about it, thinking about it in different ways. Like Chinese had 5,000 years just to do meditation with the I Ching, and the West was more doing it with material and energy and things of that nature. So it's interesting that they kind of get to the same answer, right? And it tells you that there's this universal causal mechanism that we're all semi-tapping into a little bit, right? With these little, it's like you can almost see that evolution of consciousness in real time.
Absolutely. There's a really interesting thing in the I Ching, in Taoism, where they talk about one thing that blew my mind about Taoism. I did a bunch of reading back in university, and the Tao is very similar to a lot of the Dionysian in many ways. This idea of going with the flow and finding the true stability. What blew my mind, if you read some of these Taoist guys, I can't remember the exact guy now, it's been a long time, but their idea of true stability is two wheels spinning like a bicycle, constantly in motion. That infinity loop that we see that is the structure of the universe. And as long as you're constantly moving in that forward momentum, you would achieve perfected balance of stability and be in that immortality, right? That infinite loop is literally an infinity, and people forget to recognize this, but that is the nature of our reality. We are that bicycle going through time in that harmonious balance, It's wild to think about. And you're right, like these ancients understood this stuff way back then. We're just starting to pierce this together. And because a lot of it is, we've been, we don't want to believe that the ancients knew this stuff. We fall to Occam's razor, and a lot of it has been obscured, But it's like it's so and remember, there's this thing about the hexagon of Saturn. The ancient Egyptians talk about it. They literally talk about Saturn is a cube. Saturn has this point, and they describe it mathematically. This is like 5,000 BCE. There is no way they were seeing the hexagon on fucking Saturn. What are they talking about? How do they know this? You know what I mean? Like there's some wild stuff going on that has been lost through time.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean there's an African tribe that knew about the companion
Dogon.
star of Sirius, right?
Yeah. The dog star. That's well known. A good friend of ours, Mandy and I, Dion, in the 90s actually traveled to the Dogon and took initiation with them and got to listen to all this stuff. And it's wild. And it's truly authentic. A lot of modern people are like, oh no, they've been influenced by modern philosophy and whatnot. So it's not a traditional ancient African thing. And Dion calls that pure bullshit. It's like, yeah, the ancients had understanding that we have lost and ways of recognizing the stars, especially, that have been completely devoid to us,
Yeah.
So we're coming up on our 10 minutes here, Mandy. I don't want Tiger and I to rant.
Oh, no. It was beautiful whipped cream on top of this Hecatian cake. I absolutely love it. If your preferred vegan option for whipped cream, there's a nice
chickpea sauce.
You're doing that's where your brain went?
Yeah, the chickpea water.
The chickpea water?
Yeah.
Do you know the difference between a chickpea and a garbanzo bean? It doesn't cost $100 to have a garbanzo bean on your face.
I fucking knew it. You take the chickpea water, you blend it up, and it turns into a cream.
That's where your brain went with
Yeah.
with the foam on the Hecate cake?
Yes.
It didn't go to
He
Aphrodite.
was saying if
as the-
you're vegan or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's
You didn't go to Aphrodite. You went
It didn't go to Aphrodite. It went to chickpeas.
Yeah, that's how my wife's vegetarian, so that's how we make her like froths and stuff. So
100% of the audience was like, "Oh yeah, Aphrodite with the foam."
And you're like, egg replacer, vegetarian, vegan egg replacer.
Hey, I heard what I heard, and I.
No, I love it. That's what the book is inspired to do.
You're welcome.
I'm just saying that 100% of everybody that was, along for this ride went to Aphrodite when they heard the foam.
Yeah.
And you went to chickpeas.
Chickpea water. Yeah.
I love it. That's great.
You're
Write
welcome.
about it. Put it in the book.
I don't know what that's called. It's the thing.
I think it's like aqua
something. Yeah, you're right.
something.
Yeah.
That was really, really fun. I love that
You're
that
welcome.
just happened.
I
This
think
is what
it's
our
French,
writing
actually.
sessions are like. Is shit just comes out. It's like we're just like it falls out and we just pick it up and put it in the book. So all of this stuff that fell out, we're picking up and putting in the book. And funny thing is that Johnny created Skobie Won, Sobakis Won created an AI where he fed the book to an AI.
Yep.
To start working on when we interact with the AI for the books to make certain suggestions and stuff. So the book is it's a snake eating its own
That's
tail
it.
now.
Thank you.
Where we just
Thank
keep
you,
feeding
Sketch.
the book back. Hey, check that out. We were pretty close. Not too far off.
I didn't make this shit up. Come on.
Man, no one made up the.
But yeah, what you're saying is
Africa.
that I fed all of the aphorisms into an AI and said, "Hey, these are all our aphorisms and our ideas. Can you, help us create new ones?" And it was just like it started feeding us ones that I was like, "Holy shit, that's really good!" Like,
All right, this
You're
is
not
this.
doing galaxy gas, are you, Skobie?
No.
Jesus Christ,
This is a wonderful question because what we're asking right now. So the Boof Troop, they're really really interested in the butt drugs and how this has to do with the Hecatean ritual and stuff. So the question right now is, can you boof the gas?
Can you?
How's it work? What's that
I don't
work?
think you can.
We should talk about this kind of Hecatean ritual stuff that everyone is getting into and is obsessed with from the Ammon stuff for a second. Because there is a deep philosophical lens that everyone fucking misses and no one is paying attention to. If you want to understand Ammon, read George Bataille, The Accursed Share. You got to understand what you were talking about, Tiger, this breaking of liminal space, recognizing the pan, the all, through the left-hand path, the invocation of taboo. And it has to be the breaking of taboo. This is why it's the ripping apart of babies. This is why it's the desecration of a virgin. It has to be the most horrific, brutalized thing imaginable, right? George Bataille literally tried to create a secret society, right, for the god Asaphael, which is the god in the PGM, the Stella of Ju, the headless one. And he tried to get someone to fucking decapitate him, and he couldn't find anyone to do it, the madman. He took a picture of a guy who was tortured to death through Lin Chi, which is death of 1,000 cuts, and he stuck it on his wall, and he used to just look at it and go, You know why? Because he saw that guy in a state of ecstasy and transcendence. And this is all throughout the Greco-Roman tradition. What happens to the Virgo? She is set ablaze, and it is through being burned upon the pyre that she ascends to the stars. What happens to Orpheus? He's ripped a fucking part, and then he ascends to the stars and becomes a god. What happens to Jesus? He's crucified and becomes a god. Jesus Christ is just the Grecian hero, guys. And all of this is just the accursed share and the left-hand path. The breaking of taboo in order to experience the all. That's it. Rant's done.
Rant's done. And you know, if you weren't experiencing the all and you didn't contribute to the experience of the all while you were dancing around these phallic poles, you were shamed. You were shamed for not experiencing the all. Why would you be part of our community if you weren't going to experience the all? Why aren't you contributing to the potlatch? Why aren't you contributing to the orgies? Why aren't you on drugs with us? Why aren't you partaking?
You have to engage in the lewdness. You got to shame yourself, right?
And if there was a designated person in the community to shame you, and that person was the satirist. And also, love your rants. We don't call them rants. We call them diatribes. Thank you very much. Take that word and add that one to your
No, but I want to mention this because some people are arguing, there is no virgin in the biblical text. The young boy is not, it doesn't bloody matter. It doesn't bloody matter. If Jesus is doing the mystery, he's invoking and breaking the taboo, and he's getting killed for it. That is the bloody story. It's the story that's been retold 1 billion times. It doesn't freaking matter what the text said. That is the mythopoetic image that keeps being repeated, from Orpheus to Heracles to Jesus to Medea to all. It's all the fucking same. And if I don't care what the text literally says, and anyway.
And I know Tiger Shark is basically on board with this thought, is that what we have for Mark, right? The Gospel of Mark was originally a stage play. So these are things that were done in reality in the mystery rites. Somebody took it to the stage, and then somebody took the stage to the page. And the amount of things that are lost from taking the stage to the page, you're so far removed from the actual mystery rites that were taking place in the tent, right? Like the tent, and then you go to the stage, there's a mythological gap in there. From the stage to the page, you have another gap. So you're 2 parts removed from what the text says versus what the actual reality was. And not to mention the time element. These could be thousands of years that these traditions have spanned. So the ways the words and the ways the traditions of emulating these things on the stage, those all have to be taken into consideration. The Gospel of Mark was a stage play, not a gospel text, right?
Even if let's say the Gospel of Mark doesn't talk about some of the more lewd magical stuff that we're alluding to. What does the secret Gospel of Mark? What does the text of the Borphirites? What does the works of George Clement? Like you can go on and on and on and on. The Templars, Crowley, all of this. There's a whole entire left-hand tradition in the West that is well documented, that has existed since the time of Christ and even before. And if it's very clear to anyone who's understanding the mystery rites that I don't care who Jesus was as a figure, but as a mythic image, he is Orpheus. That is who he is. That is the role he is playing, and that's what happens.
Anybody who is read where Jesus gets his namesake, Jason and the Argonauts, right? Knows that Orpheus is the mirror image, which we have talked about extensively tonight, of Medea.
Yeah.
So they are two.
Yeah.
There's an implicit other in this story of Jesus as Orpheus, and that is Medea.
Yeah.
Medea's
Why is Orpheus the
present.
feminine man and Medea the masculine woman?
Yes.
It's a very clear polar tradition. You see this imagery everywhere. And, it's like, there's so much going on with that kind of stuff. And Jason is a drug man. The name Jason just means the drug man. It literally means the drug man. Why does he go on his boat? To get the drugs. Where does he go? To Hecate and Medea to find the drugs, right?
And I think they just become more complex as they go because they build up a tolerance to them.
Yep.
That's why I think some of these quote unquote gods are just retiring of a drug, and they're like the modern. They're the ancient Sasa Shogun. I don't know if you know who that is. Alexander Sasa Shogun.
I'm not too familiar.
I don't know if he's alive anymore, but he had a FBI, basically a free pass to experiment crossing psychedelic compounds with different, crossing plants together and things like that and making new compounds. And I think that's kind of what they were getting at. I think they were mixing other things and creating new things, and kind of they had to. Their tolerance was building up as psychonauts, so they had to start making these advanced mixtures. Then they started getting with the snake venoms. That's where I think, Satan came in with all of that, right? Yahweh, that whole thing, right? So it's just, that's the way I look at it. I don't know, maybe I'm just too far off in that field, but
there's clearly an element of that happens, okay? And there's a lot of arguments have been made about this when you study, like specifically in the Vedic traditions, because in the Vedas we can date based on the time of the recitation. And it's so well documented. So when you look at the soma goes through an evolution. In the earliest iterations, the soma is a drug that gets you hyped, and you go to war. Indra drinks the soma to go fight, right? But then later on, it becomes this mystical thing about achieving the heights, and it's no longer about the strength. So then there's this: does the drug change? Does the compound change? And I bet it's exactly what you're talking about. They refined it over time. Also, you're dealing with mobile people who are horse people. What happens when you leave one plane and enter a new plane? The drugs aren't the fucking same, right? All of a sudden, the same plants you can't find anymore, and we know also a lot of these plants do get lost, like the sylphanum, which was a magical aphrodisiac of the Greek and Roman tradition. The last version was consumed by Augustus. It's all documented, and the Sylphium disappeared. Now, modern science has brought back claims to have found it. It's highly debatable. They claim to have found it through genetic variation in Lebanon, but it's clearly related to that original plant. But Mandy, you and I have talked about this at length too. Remember, Carl Ruck at one point tried to recreate the Eleusinian mysteries based on his understanding. And he went and got purpurea from barley corn and did it, but it didn't work. And the first things that I asked were twofold. Did he do the rites? No, he didn't do the rites. Nope. And then two, did he use ancient cultivars? No,
he didn't.
You're using modern barley, and you're not doing the cedar.
Yeah.
Is this where you're talking about the strains of barley and
yeah, exactly. So and I love Tiger Shark for this, because we talked about this earlier, and he found actually a chokeweed in some places also produces ergot. So you have a rural tradition of harvesting chokeweed, which is like highly concentrated, and exporting ergot to the city. Right, that's that rural and city dynamic. The authentic tradition is what you find in the rural chthonic, of the ground, right? Because these were people who were not farmers that had farming imposed on them, right? So they're still getting the drugs that were in these wild cultivars, and then when you disturb the ground where you're getting your normal wild cultivars that you're using for gynecological medicine, what you do is you disturb the ground and you get weeds that interact with your cultivars that you then introduced. The cultivars that were introduced were bred wheat for beer and bread, not the small patches of purple that the ergot was originally cultivated for, right? That was the original cultivation, and they were like little gardens and all of that. So what happened was you had these shamanistic cultures that would stay at these festival sites and do like horticulture and cultivating of drugs, and they would have these small little gardens of ergot infected wheat. And that, when agriculture came in, the grains that were ergotized went into the agriculture and became a pest. And that's something that they fought against. So chokeweed itself also produces ergot. Yeah, absolutely wild. So whatever ergot that the Eleusinian mysteries were, the rye or the wheat, any of that cultivars that was originally grown on, that's long gone. No one grows any of that anymore.
We talked about this at length, Mandy, but remember, we looked at the Germanic tradition and the purity beer laws, where they literally went on a crusade against ergot.
Yep.
It's the only time they did a crusade against a non-people, but the ergot is a satanic devil, right? It causes necrosis of the flesh, it causes madness, and it is central for the pagan rites. So for these three reasons, it had to be stricken. And in Germany, they still follow these purity laws for their beer. You can't just freaking, there's no ergot, allowed. And that is fundamentally different than the way that the ancients were doing it, because the ancients were cultivating for the purposes of getting ergot.
Exactly.
It's literally the exact opposite.
It's the reason that they were cultivating for the ergot was for gynecological medicine. The Hecatean tradition, right? Yeah. The way that you interact with nature is fundamentally different, right? When patriarchy takes over, the cultivation of the medicine that was used during childbirth, the most important thing in that tradition, and the highest risk of women throughout history of death, right? Of meeting Cerberus and all of those things, right? It always goes back to that. And the original reason that they cultivated this little grain, and now we have beer and all that, was to reduce bleeding during childbirth. And now we have everything that we have, right? So the original cultivars that they had, the closest thing that we can have is the wild wheat that still grows in places like Göbekli Tepe and all that. It grows out there. And there was a botanist that went out there before Göbekli Tepe was excavated and stuff, and said he did an experiment and said, I wonder how long it would take me to harvest enough wheat to feed my family for a year. And he determined that it would take a family of 4, 3 weeks to harvest enough wheat, wild wheat, from the outskirts of Göbekli Tepe to feed themselves for an entire year, for over a year. So they had a surplus of grain from the wild available wheat. And, what do you do when you have all of that excess time, right? We're talking about time, right? You're not talking about time where exactly. You're not talking about time where you're actively striving to feed yourself. You just fed yourself and your family for in 3 weeks for more than a year. For more than a year, right? You're fine. If you don't, right? And that's not taking into consideration fishing. That's not taking into consideration other hunting and gathering. That's not taking into consideration hunting, any of that stuff. Wild berries in season, nothing. Just the grain alone. The caloric intake was more than a surplus just on what was immediately available. And he took that grain, those wild cultivars, and brought them back to the United States. And people said, you're crazy. This has no commercial value. Why would you do this? And what ended up happening was a blight on the grain in the West, and all of the grain died. So he came and interacted with all of these other scientists and bred a cultivar that was resistant to the blight that was damaging all of the crop in America and fed billions of people, because he went out to Göbekli Tepe and did an experiment and harvested the wheat by hand. Now imagine, it only takes 3 weeks to feed your family, right? What is your motivation? To not die during childbirth. You've done fed yourself. Now don't die, right? There's grain out there that has
this little tiny you have a lot of time. What are you going to do? You're going to develop drugs. Yes. One of the things in anthropology that we all need to recognize and understand is that all civilization occurs for the creation of drugs.
Yes.
It's this, the three main spots where civilization takes place: Göbekli Tepe, Manchuria in China, and on the Peruvian steppes. All three of them arrive with concurrently with the production of alcohol, either grain alcohol, spit alcohol, or fermented fruit alcohol, right? But it's wild, and it happens at the same time in three different spots around the globe at the same time, all for the same reason. Like, it's so fucking wild to me, you know? That's how important alcohol is too. And a lot of us, we misunderstand. Like, food was abundant, but what wasn't abundant for tribal people? Clean drinking water.
Yes.
And what was their most readily available source of clean water would be fruit. But if you're eating a ton of fruit, it's too sweet. You will get sick and you can't preserve it. So you will just leave it out. And if you just leave fruit out, it will turn into bloody alcohol. You know, bears purposely get drunk. There are even several types of other mammals that will make beer and get drunk. You know, it's kind of.
You ever tried Mad Honey?
I have not. Have you? I've heard about the Mad Honey.
They sell it now at my local shops.
That's
Now,
so
whether
wild.
it's
is it
you
the
know,
Holly one, or is it?
yeah, it comes in like
something. Or?
It comes in like 5 like 1 gram little pouches or whatever. But you remember that story? Like, they fed it to, was it? I don't know who was warring. I forget. My history's bad, but I guess the Roman soldiers ate a bunch of it and they got sick or something. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I forget what city that is, but it's pretty funny. Yeah, going on that vein with the psychoactives and Native American culture, I'm 50% Meskwaki hockey and all that stuff. We were taught, from oral tradition, obviously, with the medicine, right? And a lot of that came from actually observation. And we were observing the animals. And Western science, right? You're always going to get people that say science is a Western invention. Well, what do you call ayahuasca? Because that is science. They found a root in a vine that grow 800 miles apart. And if you ask the shamans how they figured out to add those two together, one being the MAO inhibitor, how would they figure that out? They said the plants told us, right? So where do that goes along lines with like what Rupert Sheldrake's saying with the morphic resonance, right? There's other communications happening. There's other connections in the ecosystem, not just the human system, right? That's the egotism, right? Is man first, but ecosystem is holistic. And there's other forms of communication and forms that are happening during those communal interactions with humans and animals and plants and fungi.
It also reminds me, this is something that Mandy and I have talked about a lot, but like a lot of modern people do not understand tribal and, non-sedentary communities very well, especially in America. Like, one of the big wake-up calls for me is like in my area, it's mostly woods. But the wild thing is the archaeologists and the anthropologists started studying the woods around here, and they noticed that they are completely balanced food sources. What I mean is that any time of the year you can go into these woods here and you will find edibles, even in the deep of winter, because they were constructed. These are not wild forests. They're semi-wild forests that were maintained and turned into food production centers for nomadic peoples. And they would know when to go to certain areas and when not to. And all of North America was like this, not just like small versions too. And like where I'm from in Sault Ste. Marie, what's so wild to me, on Whitefish Island, this small island where they do a ton of trade and people would come for the whitefish, that area would boom from having around 250 people to over 10,000 people in the summer times. And they found trade there all the way to Mexico. They found lapis lazuli and jade. So the indigenous people here were trading across North America. It's like, there's so much more knowledge than we give credit, especially when it comes to these plant systems and how to survive.
Well, I call it Silk Road, and that road would be, I don't know what kind of road what name you want to give it, but that's another Silk Road.
The River Road, because they did it through the waterways, Like,
there you go, yeah.
One of my cousins a few years back traveled from the Mississippi in Canada all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Like, you can do this.
Yeah, they found peyote traded up there too in the wood, the woodland natives up there. the Algonquins, right? So
Yeah.
peyote coming from the desert climate. But yeah, these are all corridors. I call them riparian corridors of consciousness, actually. And it's not from any major empire controlling this. This is coming from, like Mandy said, the agricultural farmers. It's coming from the hunters, the what we would call the great peacemakers, the shamans, the
The
medicine men.
Haudenosaunee, right?
But it's everything together, right? It's not just the
Intertwining at
system
an
of
agricultural
man.
festival. You mean a
Yes.
mixed offering at an agricultural festival? There's a word for that. Satire. That's the beauty is in the mixing because the result is always different.
Yeah.
You know, and in encouraging that mixing, inspiring that mixing,
Well,
inspiring new mixes. You know, that's how something beautiful comes out. That's the chaos that
What
can give
also
birth to a dancing star. You know,
what's
and it
so
doesn't.
beautiful to me about all this, thinking about the Aboriginal stuff, it just blows my mind because, you know, I spent so much of my life getting obsessed with the Hellenistic tradition and didn't look in my own backyard. And then a few years ago, started looking in my own backyard, and the parallels are insane. You see the same democracy, you see much of the same myths, especially like if you look at the Haudenosaunee people, the Iroquois people, the great peacemaker Hiawatha, he who combs the snakes out of your hair.
Yeah.
You know, like what the hell is that? They have the great virgin Deganawida, and what does she do? She convinces people to not fight and to embrace community. It's like all of the same parallels are all here. They have an evil shaman who has snakes in his hair, and he kills people from afar using the same. Hecate's name means to shoot from afar, to kill with the far magic. You know, you see all these parallels. They got these red-headed giants that have the stone skin from doing necromancy, they talk about. And the great peacemaker ends all this. He tells them, stop doing those bad drugs. Come join with us. They comb the snakes out of the one shaman's hair. He becomes the first democratically elected president of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. You know, and it's so wild. And most people forgot about this. Even if when you go and you read the writings of the American founders, they were just as inspired by the local people as they were by the ancient Greeks. In fact, more so by the local people because Americans were running off and becoming native.
Yeah,
They saw the equality.
our
and
Constitution is from the Iroquois Confederacy, not
Yeah.
from the Western democracy.
Yeah. It's exactly. It just people think it is because it mirrors so well. Because you've got two ancient cultures coming to the same beautiful idea because it's beautiful. They don't need to share it. You know,
Exactly, and they both come from the drugs.
they both
That's what
come
I'm
from the
saying.
drug,
That's why
and
that's
the
why
tribal.
democracy's failing is because they outlawed the very thing that fucking made it.
Yep. And the women also, you know, the sad thing when you look at the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois democracy, the key to that democracy is the longhouse and the grandmothers. The grandmothers choose the men who sit at the tribal fire, right? Yeah. And it's the grandmother who becomes the center of everything. And when people can't work together, you don't have prisons. You go and you have to sit in front of the grandmothers and explain yourself.
My stepdad is full blood Seneca, right?
Yeah.
And so they were that's a true monarchy, my friend. They were not a patriarchy. The woman was the leader in that in their nation. I don't want to call them tribe because that's another their term.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, in their nation, they were a matriarchal society and the women ruled. And, you know, I remember reading about this history when the European colonizers came and were dealing with the Iroquois, they went immediately to the war chiefs. And the war chiefs didn't know what they were doing. They're like, why are you talking to me? Why aren't you talking to the grandmother?
Yeah.
You know, but what they would do is they give the war chief a bunch of money and say, can we take that land? And the war chief goes, I don't give a shit about the land. No one owns the land. Go have the land. Give me the guns and the drugs. You know, and that's how they used to deal with the natives here. And so it totally broke everything up. It you know, I remember also reading one thing that totally blew my mind. It was so beautiful. It's this Christian mercenary, and he's talking to an Iroquois shaman and explaining Christ and explaining sin. And the Iroquois shaman goes, "This is childish. This is silly. Jesus needs to go sit with the grandmother." He says, Your God needs to sit with the grandmothers and learn how to be a good man. How to quit judging people. Why is he so judgmental? Care what his neighbors are doing. Like, that's how the natives saw this. They saw this Christian philosophy as childish because it is. They had already resolved these communal issues in an organic way. But what happened in Europe is you got patriarchal capitalistic power that reasserted these divisions for exploitation and control. And then they just weaponized the poor and desperate and sent them fucking here, you know? And it's so depressing.
Did you know in 1988, the U.S. Congress actually recognized that the Constitution was heavily influenced, if not all of influence, from the Iroquois?
I love
And
that. I didn't know that.
and they said specifically the 13 colonies as well, because Christians will try to claim that they were the influence. They had 13 different churches or whatever that influenced the colonies to join to start up. But it was the push of it was breaking of the treaties because those native tribes up there in the north east had treaties actually with Britain. And when George Washington wanted more land to expand west, he had to. They had treaties, so a lot of the natives didn't want to sell the land to him or give it to him, and he knew the only way he could get it is if he broke the treaty. That's what that whole war was about. It wasn't about this taxation and all this other shit in the harbor. It was that land grab that he wanted to have and implement, and he did
I
it.
did read about this because George Washington is a huge piece of garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I remember reading this land scheme where he set up a shipping company to get poor Britishers to come to the UK, but how they would pay for their boat trip was that the land that they would be promised, then they'd have to give to him and work it as an indentured servant. So that's how he became the richest single landholder in all of the US. That's why he became president, because he was the richest American at the time. And people don't recognize, like, Americans don't study a lot of their own history. You know, in Canada, we're told George Washington started the War of 1812. He killed French. What do you call it? So there were French people who were crossing the Canadian border with indigenous people in order to broker a treaty. And Washington just saw Indians and shot. And he killed 2 French treaty brokers. Like, that's a declaration of war. So he literally started the War of 1812. And no one even talks about this. This guy is a literal buffoon who's ripping off his own people, stole all that land from the indigenous people. And this is the founding father. You know,
Yeah.
this guy that everyone loves who could never tell a lie.
And then you say these things to people and they're like, well, America, the republic, it's not a democracy. And I'm like, well, what do you think a republic is? It has a constitution. Dingus. You know, that's where
It's just the French iteration of democracy.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just French democracy versus British parliamentarism. It's the same ideal, though. The idea is to have proper representation.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's all nonsense.
Separation of power, and they went on to say exactly what was influenced, but separation of powers, impeachment practices, process, and you know, a president basically could be tried for criminal crimes if they commit them. So all of those things they drew from the Iroquois Confederacy. And the interesting one, actually, the Seneca. So that was the whole story with Tanadaho, I believe his name.
Yeah, Tanadaho, the guy with the snakes in his hair.
So that's the story with him. But the Seneca, when they went to ask the Seneca, do you want to join? They first said no. And what got them to join was they were actually having one of these light skirmishes with one of the other tribes or nations. And there was a solar eclipse for 5 minutes. And that's what got them to, they went, oh, something's going on here. We better stop fighting each other and join this Confederacy thing. So that's what got them to join, which is also interesting too.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little bit of astrology or astronomy, you know, astro going in with the psychedelics that formulated the whole.
Well, this is another thing that blew my mind. The Iroquois have a zodiac with 12 zodiacal signs. What is going on there? And it does not come from any other tradition from the anywhere else on Earth.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen? You know, and you look at their like. Well, we went to the my friend Dion and I. We do a show called Occult Explorers. We did a deep dive into this place called Chaco Canyon, which is in the deep south of the United States. I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's one of these interesting places because it's a crossing grounds between North American indigenous groups and South American indigenous groups. And you see this kind of battle for this spot happening because this is a really amazing spot to see the clear sky. And all along Chaco Canyon, you have all of these incredible drawings and all of these different astrological signs. But one of the interesting things is there's this story where they talk about how the two tribal groups would fight to rule, and how they would do it is through sacred gambling and games. And they talk about how the indigenous people from the South won because they had different drugs and they cheated, but they still had to abide by the game. You know, and so what ends up happening is that the local people learn how to handle their drugs and beat the foreigners at their own game, and they reclaim control of Chaco Canyon. But it was this thing where you would constantly be fighting through sport and through different games in order to claim land and stuff. There's so much wildness that we've lost, but we see this in it's like we look at it in the indigenous communities as foreign and different. But if you read the Greek myths or the Egyptian myths or it's the same shit, you know.
Yeah, I mean they're all traversing that Silk Road and trading ideas, and I think even like the Olmecs probably influenced like that whole serpent mound that's in Ohio, just randomly. Like that's a imprint of when those South American drugs got there, in my opinion. And they started doing them, and they're like, shit, we're gonna make fucking gods and mounds and worship this shit, right? And that, to me, that's just another signature of this geographical exchange of not only the drugs but also the cultures, right?
Also, 100%. And I believe that there has to be something with these drugs transitioning you feel a lot physically, because the fact that we see across North America the same physical descriptions for these drug users, the red hair, the being taller, and then the flaky skin. This is a constant. Why do the indigenous people in North America and South America have the same myths about weird giants with red hair that the Greeks do? You know, and the same kind of drugs too, involving snake venom.
Yeah.
You know, there's something to this. There's something to this genetic shift. You know, there's got to be. But we're going late, Mandy. I'm sorry.
No. I absolutely love everything that's happening right now. I had to go drain the dragon for a minute. Did I miss anybody mentioning the word chthonic or autochthonic?
No. Autochthonic? I don't think anyone said it, but
okay. There, so we sort of we play around with the word, those ideas in the book. Within Greek mythology, you have these chthonic gods, which are of the earth, right?
Versus of the stars. Yeah.
Exactly. So you know what? And then you have autochthonic, which is like people who go there and then become of that earth, right? Yeah. So what's being described here, I think it's explicitly sort of gets into this too, is the colonization component of the Greeks. You know what I mean? We sort of look at them as, some people kind of idolize the Greeks and put them up as being the superior people because the language is so nice and big and, you know, fucks the earth and all that. We get that, but like they really violated a lot of people, right? And a lot of populations, and then, you know, took some of their stuff.
An empire, right?
To theirs, right?
One of the first big world empires.
Exactly. So, you know, there's this imperialism and there's you know, Greek colonization and all of the things that are true for you know, the Native American and, you know, what people of my skin complexion that came over here that did all of the things to tiger sharks people, you know, all of those things. Sorry. I'm writing a book to help. But like, you know, all of those things, that's like the Greeks were also handling that and asking those questions and doing that anthropology and recognizing themselves in these groups and their differences and like how the differences, were genealogically and
what's
intersected.
interesting with the Greek tradition, though, is I think we see this abandoning of the earlier tribal way of life, which is the democracy and the matriarchy.
Yeah.
And then it becomes abandoned in turn for empire, right? And we see that embodied in Alexander the Great, and then that pagan idea of democracy and religion survives. It still manifests in Rome, but it eventually does even get supplanted by that patriarchal masculine form of power and control, which dominates. And then that image usurps the Judaic form. Well, what ends up happening, right? Rome is all about money, and Rome sees the power of the Jewish temple, right? Because Judaism was an endogamic religion, and because they required tithing, that temple in Jerusalem became the most powerful temple in the known world and started generating more money than Rome was generating. This is a fucking problem, right? In the Roman world. And you start to get the rise of what we call Yaoism, which are these offshoot cults that are related to the biblical Judaism that's existing in Israel, but they're inspired forms by people who had gone and done tourism and then went home and amalgamated with their own stuff. This is where you get the PGM from, where you get a pagan calling himself Moses in order to cut his head off and become the headless god. Like there's all this wild amalgamation that happens. But eventually what the Romans realize is that with Christianity is that you have the combination. You have that Jewish nationalism and exceptionalism and endogamy, that exclusionary occultedness that is so powerful for maintaining control. But you also have that pagan universalism, that pagan love. And they were able to they could have their cake and eat it too. They could talk out of both sides of their mouths. So Christianity became the one because it was able to be weaponized against the other, and it was able to incorporate the other as well. So you see that it becomes an imperial cultic force. And so it either wipes you out or incorporates you, so most of the pagan tradition gets destroyed, but some of the pagan tradition evolves and becomes intrinsic parts of it in Catholicism. But then Christianity revolts even against Catholicism in that, you get this. So it's funny, in the earliest Catholic traditions, you have a deep acceptance of paganism largely, right? The pagan mothers become the Virgin Mother. The pagan gods become saints. Saint George is not a real person. He's just a British god. He is Mithras slaying the dragon, right? But now he's become Saint George in the Catholic tradition. You even see this in modern times with like voodoo and Catholicism. They're like this. But then Christianity evolves again and has to refine itself. You have that Protestant Revolution where it removes those pagan images again and becomes more and more isolated. And we're seeing this more and more and more, like modern science is almost another expression of this atheistic Christian attack on all spirituality and on nature itself, right? It's like we have to vilify the other. We have to reject the other in order to manifest our will and become that divine being upon the earth. In my mind as a pagan, the central issue with Christianity, that what makes it horrendous, is that it seeks to stop time and to deify man and to put it in the earth, and to create an apocalypse in which now everything is stagnant and in control. You're creating a utopia that's doomed to fucking fail, in which you're on the top and everyone is in this perpetual submission. That's like the worst nightmare imaginable. But this is the Christian ideal, It's
transcendental nihilism. The earth isn't good enough. They have to go somewhere else. They're waiting around for a new earth because it's going to be better. And they're all elitists. You can't join the club unless you're with us.
Yep, unless you submit to us. And it's always about submitting to higher forms of hierarchy. You submit to a higher king who submits to a higher king who submits to a higher king. It's all fucking ridiculous. And it just manifests stagnation. And it's fundamentally anti-nature. it's anti-life.
It's anti-life, yeah, anti-human.
Death
Yeah.
cult. And this is what I see so much in our modern world, is that we have this death cult born of decadence that has now manifested itself as either the Christian or the Muslim or the tech bro. But all of these things are just as evil, you know?
That's right. This is a good comment too by Cameron. Yeah, that's what Nietzsche's wager was. You know, Pascal's wager. Well, read up on Nietzsche's wager because that's what he basically said. He's like, "How do you know you're not already in hell or heaven right now, on earth, right? So this is my wager to you." And he had another little, couple sentences explaining why that would be the case over the idea of heaven and in the Christian world. But yeah, I go with that a lot too. Yeah.
I really like that aspect of Nietzsche. You know, Nietzsche was really great too for seeing that. What am I getting at here? It's this idea that, we have to reject that he uses this. I don't like the terminology he uses. He uses Jewish, but let's understand what he means by that. He means that monotheistic religion, that endogamic exclusionary religion, that hyper elitist victimizing religion that turns the world against us and is about asserting your absolute will. It doesn't have to be Jewish. It can be any extreme. It can be Islam. It can be Christian. It can even be a political fascism. It's really fascism, fundamentally, that is the issue. Trying to assert your will and stop time. Trying to manifest utopia.
Well, if you're trying to do your will and stop time, that to me is just what you explained earlier. It's a depression. It's a depression because you're limiting yourself and you're basically going and destroying the culture to implement your own. But wouldn't somebody that's trying to learn and evolve and move forward into the future want to learn and grow from other cultures?
Absolutely. It's victory of the lames. This is what I mean. Like, Elon Musk to me sums it up, because everyone knows that Elon Musk is a fucking loser. He's not smart. He's not skilled. He's ugly. He's fat. And yet he constantly lies and drums himself up and buys prestige in every way humanly possible. And then, though, the key to this is look at who supports him. Other lanes, other people who are like, if I empower this guy, if I suck his cock, I don't look like a lame piece of shit. If he's not lame, I'm not lame. And it's the same thing with Trump. If Trump grabs him by the pussy and gets away with it, then I'm not a fucking rapist. It's the most sick, ridiculous. Why are identifying with another? Like, all these people, they're caught up in egregoric magic, sacrificing their will, not doing their own work, not looking at themselves, giving over their.
His oldest kid don't even like him, and he's had how many wives? Like 3 wives, 10 kids. His oldest doesn't even talk to him. I mean,
kids now. He just had another
14 kids.
2 kids in the last couple months.
And he was dating Amber Heard too at one point, right?
And the accusation too is that none of these kids are even normal. They're all done through in vitro because he can't even fuck. Here's the thing. A bunch of people who are friends with Grimes, now this is all rumor mill, but I would tend to believe it. They say that Grimes told them, and Grimes was one of his wives, told him that he tried to get a dick job and it was botched, and now it doesn't work. Yeah, and that is, to me, the definition of a lame. 100%. You have such ridiculous penis issues that you go and get a surgery that makes it not work. My God.
Oh, that's hilarious. At this point, it wouldn't even surprise me, No,
it wouldn't surprise me. This is the guy who lied about being the best player in the world at a video game that literally sucks your entire life. Dude, you are a CEO for 12 fucking companies. Who in the right mind would believe you're world class? It's a literal impossibility. And yet you continue to lie about it and pay people to lie for you. Like, what in that is the lamest thing I've ever heard.
What game did he lie about? I remember that. What game was it again? I forget.
Oh, Path of Exile. He claimed to be one of the greatest players of Path of Exile in the world. Path of Exile 2. Now, to be a great player at this game, it's like You got to be putting in.
Didn't he
how-
pay like the actual kid that was one of the best to
Yeah.
play for him or whatever? Yeah.
He had items that are so rare and impossible to get. Like it didn't even make fucking sense. Like there's no way, like, dude. If to be this guy, you had to be the WoW guy. You couldn't have a life. You clearly have a life. We see you on TV every day. There's no way this is you.
You know who he is? He's basically the modern freaking Joseph Smith. Just a like.
Yeah. Joseph Smith, or what's that guy? He thinks he's Tesla, but he's Tesla's mortal enemy there. Who's the American build? Edison.
Oh, Edison. Yeah.
You know, who just bought everything and claimed.
He just fucking stole shit and killed people too. There's a bunch of stories of him killing people. Like, that person died, and then Edison 2 years later, okay, I'm coming out with this, and it was that other guy's. And then the person's like, even his family members started showing up dying.
Yeah. Oh, Edison was so. At one point when he was competing with Tesla, okay, I can't remember who discovered what, but one of them discovered AC and the other one discovered DC. And to prove that the other guy's electricity wasn't safe, he killed a fucking elephant. He electrocuted the elephant to death.
Yeah, that was Edison that had DC
to ruin Tesla. Like, it's insane. That's who Elon Musk is. The same kind of energy. You know?
Oh yeah. And the funny part about him is he's so stupid. Like if you were an actual intellectual, like you could use this as a limit test, right? To see if somebody's actually paying attention. But the guy, the way he just says it, he's like, I just sell superlatives. When he came out with SpaceX, what did he do? We're going to Mars. Oh, U.S. government, here's a check for $1 billion. I mean, it was just him selling a fucking idea. That's it.
You know what? I'm almost certain that's what he did to fucking Trump. He probably, the way that Trump and him talk, I bet this conversation went down. You know, if you sent a man to Mars, you would be a literal god written in the history books for all time. You know, your penis would be so big, Mr. President. You would have the biggest penis of all. It would stretch from here to fucking Mars. Let's go to Mars, President. You know what? If you let me raid the treasury, I'll have the money to go to Mars. And then Trump went, fuck, man, yeah, I'll have the biggest penis. Let's do it. And that's literally how these children act. That's what this is. It's children BS.
Speaking of children, I got to get my kids off to sleep. It's been a pleasure, Mandy, and congratulations on Volume 2, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much. Give me something for the next book. I absolutely want to hear about the Zeus's Alabastrum and the Lightning Bolt Alabastrum. I would love to have that included in the next book. This has been amazing. I love that this conversation happened. I was just letting it ride. That dessert course just kept going and going and going and getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. You know, it's that ambrosia. You know, you
got to do it again sometime
through that chaos magic. And you're dynamic that right now. Just produce that ambrosia for the audience, and I love it. You know, inspired everything. I love it. Thank you so much. One last time. Go to shopskobiewon.com, use promo code SNAPPY, 10% off, and make a contribution to the Temple of the Muses. You can get the book personally signed by us, just like we did on tonight's show. Thank everybody for coming out. I think Skobie Won just woke up from his drunken slumber. Do you have any last words?
He's looking mighty awake.
Any last words from Skobie Won?
I'm good. I mean, I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's very late.
No, I feel you. I got to be up at 5. So
yeah. Mandy will go till 4. So I have my little wing back over here. I'll go sleep in that. And
I'm just trying to encourage the muse to do her thing. I'm just being that connection, those threads, and weave that towel for for the future, because people do actually go back and watch this stuff and review it and go, oh wow, like that was actually really fun. I'm glad they touched upon all that stuff. So anyway,
when's the next volume coming out? When's Volume 2 hit the show?
So it's going to be 73 days from now. So if you want to join the Chorus of Frogs, the cutoff date for contributions is April 14th. You can send it to, let me pull this off the screen, because
so just a month and a little bit away, guys, if you want to get
like six weeks or so. You can jump in, submit something for that, or if you want to do something for the future dates, we can do that and all that. This is an amazing comment here. I love this.
The Towel of Minerva.
Hell yeah. All right. So
Gross. Are they sweet? Are you weaving different cindones together, or just you making like a grandma blanket of cindones?
however it imagines and happens in your mind, you can make that happen in the future, Judge.
Gross,
That's
dude.
the purpose of the book.
Can we just put them in a garbage?
Snappy, do you have any last words for the audience? Thank you so much for coming out. This was an amazing conversation.
Hail Snappy.
Hail Snappy.
I just love chatting with you guys. Make sure you pick up the book. It's a lot of fun. It is silly and ridiculous, but there are gems if you're willing to look, and just, trust in art. Become an aesthete. Learn to appreciate art. Doesn't matter what art you engage with. If you engage with it, you'll find beauty.
That was amazing. Tiger Shark, any last words for the audience?
No. Have a good night, everybody. Good weekend. Thanks for bringing me up, and yeah, talk soon.
Hell yeah! Thank
Can
everybody.
you post the website, Skobie or Mandy? There's a comment in the chat.
Oh yeah, post your link here. Somebody wants to purchase our book to make a contribution. And remember, you can use promo code SNAPPY for 10% off.
And all proceeds will be going to our not-for-profit religious organization, the Temple of the Muses. We are working to establish a nonprofit community temple that is based around the Hellenic traditions, but specifically honoring the muses in creativity and learning. And we're also going to be opening up a not-for-profit publication house called Draconic Works that is going to be working to republish out-of-print authors and to bring new poetry and inspired works to publication. So any of you who use that promo code, all of your profits will be going to establishing a real physical temple and to producing beautiful literature and poetry inspired by the muses.
Hell yeah. I'm going to close it out here with this little comment here. Hail the Muse. Thanks, everybody. That was amazing. This was a lot of fun. Hail Eris.
Yeah. Hail Eros and Eris. Love and strife. Empedocles says you need both.
Two
right?
cheeks of the same butt.
All right, everyone. Peace and love.
How do I stop?
Like this.
Oh, that was